The ravens still remembered the old songs of Winterfell, their throats crackling with the thin frost-brittle cadences of dusk as they circled the broken towers. Snow dusted the ramparts in drifts fine as sifted flour, filling arrow slits and tracing white lines along the stones where summer's moss had withered and pulled away. From the highest parapet, the pale banners of House Stark hung newly mended, their direwolves rendered in thread that flashed silver when the last light caught. Below, the great castle exhaled winter, slow plumes of warmth rising from hidden flues, the scent of spruce and iron and baking bread drifting over the courtyards. It felt like breathing after a wound, a long-delayed shuddering intake of life. Arya Stark stood in that courtyard with half-gloved hands plunged deep into the fur at the nape of Nymeria's neck. The direwolf's head reached almost to her shoulder now, and her thick winter coat shone gray-white, nearly the color of the falling snow. The wolf's slow pant fogged the air. Each breath seemed to echo her own heartbeat, steady, unhurried, rooted. Not so long ago the wind had driven her across a continent, a thin scrap of a girl fleeing from one danger into the next, always hungering, always angry. Here it was different. The wind of the north spoke in slower tongues. "Wait, settle, belong." She tightened her fingers in Nymeria's fur, drawing warmth. Across the yard, Maester Corrin was directing a small corps of builders toward the collapsed southeast stair, his gestures precise but gentle, as though instructing children who had never known stone. Ropes dangled from the scaffolds, and the clack of chisels rose in counterpoint to the smithy hammers beyond. Everywhere she looked, Winterfell mended itself, timber by timber, stone by stone, like a great broken creature, learning again the shape of its own bones. The rebuilding was Sansa's notion first, but Arya had taken its rhythm into her own blood. She woke before dawn each day to walk the wards with Clay the Mason, marking walls that needed repointing and lintels that sagged. She spoke with saddle makers from White Harbor about hemp stitches that would hold under northern rain, and sat at night over drafty ledgers with Gage's boy, counting bushels of oats, mapping how far the winter stores might stretch. Half the castle's hall still felt empty, yet every shutter hammered into place, every torch bracket newly fixed, deepened a sense that the house itself was listening, leaning closer each evening to nod approval at her effort. Once she would have sworn that such tasks belonged to Bran, or Robb, or even Sansa, with her measured penmanship and soft diplomacy. Lady Arya they called her now, though the word still felt like a stone beneath her tongue. Jon's letter, penned in his plain spare hand, lay tucked inside her belt. It named her Lady of Winterfell by right of Stark blood, and the acclamation of the northern bannermen, who deferred to the king in the north, awaiting him at the wall. The kingship sat awkwardly on Jon's shoulders. She could read that between every line, but he clung to duty as ever a Stark would. Guard the realm, restore the north, and for Arya, hold Winterfell. She had not returned alone. The wagons had rattled up from the neck 3 weeks past, laden with slate and lime, with smoked eel and barrels of lake salt, with swords yet to be sharpened. More than goods, they carried northern folk drawn by rumor that a Stark girl lived again in her father's hall. She watched them when they first stepped past the gatehouse, small folk in rough cloaks, families leading dun-colored goats, an old man gripping a wooden wheel with joints warped by frost. Their eyes drifted from the patched banners to the towers dark against cloud, and then, finally, to her. None said much at first. They only bowed, stiffly or shyly, as though greeting a ghost. Later, over soup thick with barley, they told stories of the old days when the Stark's justice ran like a cold, clear river, and any traveler could drink without fear. Arya listened, cheeks flushed in firelight, feeling each tale like a weight across her shoulders. A soft whistle broke the hush. Nymeria's ears pricked, but Arya recognized Hullen's call and turned. The stablemaster approached with careful steps. Years bred of hoof and hay had left him with a half-crooked gait, but his eyes were bright under silver brows. He carried a saddlecloth of dark green wool. "Finished mending Lady Sparrow's girth, milady," he said, holding it out. His voice bore the clipped deference of one still new to using titles with her. Stitching won't give now, by my oath. Arya accepted the cloth, running fingertips along the fresh thread. She'll test it, she said, light as wind. The mare, named for the way she darted through trees, trusted few hands, but Hullen's were nearly as steady as her own. Thank you. Your lord brother sends word he rides from Castle Black before the fortnight ends. Hullen's mouth twitched, part smile, part concern. Snow deeper than a pony's knee up there, they say. Hell manage, Arya answered, and made herself smile too, though the thought of Jon crossing the moors in such weather tugged at hidden fears. He always does. She turned and strode toward the armory door. Inside, the iron tang curled like wood smoke. Racks of half-blunted practice blades lined one wall, most still warped from the castles burning under Ramsay's occupation. 4 new longswords gleamed among them, just come from Micken's nephew in White Harbor. 2 shafts of pale sun fell across the straw-strewn floor. Arya stepped into one, breathing the dust-pocked glow, letting heat sink through her jerkin. She lifted needle from its peg. The old Brevosi blade felt smaller now against her calloused palm, yet its balance remained as perfect as a whispered promise. For years, this sword had meant freedom. She had carried it along the Iron Throne's shadowed corridors, across war-torn fields, and into the yawning dark of her own grief. At first, she thought to hide it away in Winterfell's vaults, fearing the blood it remembered. Yet when she tried to leave it, she felt unmoored, like a wolf stripped of scent. So she kept it, not to kill, but as a sliver of truth in uncertain times. There was honor in steel, Maester Luwin once taught Robb, if wielded wisely. Settling her feet, she advanced on a straw dummy propped by the wall. She did not picture names: Joffrey, Cersei, Polliver, Ilyn Payne. No longer. Instead, she imagined a line through the air that needed drawing, a thread of clear intention. The point flicked, quicksilver fast, striking the cloth shoulder where armor plate might sit. She withdrew, circled, stabbed anew, slow this time, exploring control. The motion eased something within her. A stone door hinged open, and the pasta's ghosts retreated to their alcoves. Day by day she practiced until her mind quieted, until swordplay felt respectful, a gesture to the dead rather than a summons. A rap sounded against the doorframe. She lowered needle. Sansa stepped in, cloak of soft gray draped across her shoulders, hair braided with the simplest of weaves. No southern pearls or gilded clasps adorned her now. Only a length of wool, winter-dyed, knotted with a carved piece of weirwood. Yet she carried herself with the same unspilled grace that once turned heads in King's Landing. Her blue eyes swept the room and settled, fond, exasperated. On Arya. Training again when you ought to be at council, she said. Sir Roderick's beard won't thank us if we start without him, and the Manderleys ride at dawn. Arya sheathed needle, feeling the slight warmth of use hum against her thigh. Lost the hour. Sorry. Don't be sorry, Sansa replied, softer. Just come. They walked side by side beneath archways that dripped melted frost. Arya caught the fragrance of pine pitch, the crush of fresh logs delivered to the great hall. Ahead, roundels of colored glass cast washed-out rainbows on the stones, father's markers, spared by fire almost by miracle. At the council chamber, Sir Roderick Castle rose from a high-backed chair of dark oak. White-streaked whiskers framed his stern mouth, but his eyes warmed as Arya entered. Beside him sat Lady Barbary Dustin, shoulders cloaked in sable. Across from her Lord Manderley's youngest son, Sir Wylis, poured steaming cider into chipped cups. When Sir Wylis caught Arya's gaze, he bowed his broad head, nearly upsetting the pitcher. Maester Colren motioned her toward the seat marked with the direwolf seal pressed in pewter. The carving was new. She could still smell linseed oil in its creases. She sat, spine straight, like father taught. A lord or a lady rules with her eyes open. News from Deepwood. Sir Roderick began, clearing his throat. House Glover writes they've driven off the last of the Ironborn Reavers. Lady Sibel petitions aid to rebuild her winter stores. Send barley from the East Fields, Arya said without pause. She'd walked those fields 3 days past. The harvest there outstripped the granaries. Maester Colrin made a careful note, quill scratching. Also, Sir Roderick went on, the lords assembled at White Harbor, ask for a tourney come first thaw, to celebrate the North's reunion under Stark. His gaze flicked to Arya. Then, Sansa. They hope to see Lady Stark preside. A silence followed. Arya tasted iron on her tongue. Memories of King's Landing tourneys, of knights in golden armor who boasted chivalry, yet craved gore. She forced her breath steady. Winterfell would need such pageantry to heal divides. Sir Roderick had argued earlier, a show of unity wielded like a banner. Very well, she said, but no melee to first blood. Archery and horse races instead, events the small folk may join. We need laughter, not more blades. Now, Sir Willis grinned. The mannerly singers will raise half the north in song, my lady. Arya nodded, but her thoughts lingered on edges of other fears. Boltons scattered yet not forgotten. Free riders prowling the King's Road, talk of dead men walking beyond the wall, filtering south through black-cloaked ranger slips. Jon's warnings marked every letter. Gather strength, forge alliances, recall old oaths. She would host tournaments, yes, but she would also see spearheads weighed, watchmen trained, ramparts patrolled. The meeting stretched, parchment passed hand to hand. Harvest charts, reclamation of Moat Cailin, the price of salt cod dahi. Sansa spoke often, voice a measured river, smoothing abruptness in Arya's terse remarks. Lady Barbary raised prickly questions of Bolton lands and vassal loyalty. Arya answered with firm promises but not vengeful threats, though she felt a wolf's growl low in her throat. At length, the candles guttered halfway down, and Sir Roderick declared a pause for supper. The sisters lingered near the hearth. Red coals flickered behind a screen of wrought iron shaped like interlocked direwolves. Sansa reached out, palms to the warm glow. You do well, she murmured. Better than you think. Arya shrugged, relief mingling with doubt. I know how to fight. Leading. She loosened her gloves, eyes tracing embers. Sometimes I feel Father's shadow in every corridor. That is no failing. Sansa's smile was soft. I feel Mother's, and someday the North will feel ours. Outside, twilight descended, pale and absolute. Lantern bearers crossed the yard, their lights bobbing like subdued fireflies. In the distance, Nymeria's howl rose, low, unhurried, almost content, and was answered by the younger wolves roaming beyond the broken outer wall. Their voices braided together, a testament of belonging that thrummed beneath the castle stones. Later, Arya climbed to the Godswood alone. Snow muffled her steps. The air tasted of cold iron. Beneath the ancient weirwood, the ground lay pristine save for paw prints circling the trunk. The face carved in the heart tree watched her with red eyes that wept sap like blood. She knelt, gloved fingers brushing the root's gnarled skin, and listened. Wind hissed through bare branches like distant surf. A hush settled so deep she could almost feel the pulse of Winterfell underfoot. A slow, resilient heartbeat, older than any song. She whispered then, not prayers, but truths she must remember. I am Arya of House Stark, Lady of Winterfell, sister to Sansa, daughter of Eddard and Catelyn. I do not need to be no one. I can be someone here. The bark under her palm felt warmer now, as though hearing her vow. The days broadened into a pale midwinter. Each morning began with a cadence of repairs. Masons at the gatehouse, carpenters shaping beams for the collapsed rookery, women twisting hemp into rope as thick as a child's wrist. Arya walked among them, asking names, learning small histories. Mara of Last Hearth, whose mother once baked oatcakes for Bernard Stark. Tormentine, a lank youth whose father fell at the Red Wedding, and who swung his mallet as if each strike might rebuild him too. One dawn she joined the kennel master in the yard. Stifling laughter as Nymeria lorded over a pack of wolf dogs imported from Skagos. Massive brutes with mottled coats, now rolling boneless on their backs to show submission. The sight heartened her more than any parchment decree. Even the wildest creatures recognized Winterfell's new order. Afternoons she rode Sparrow across the white fields south of the castle. At her side thundered small companies of gallows green archers, drilling under Sir Roderick's command. She watched arrows arc like silent flocks, seeding the frozen earth with black shafts. When riders tired, she dismounted too, sharing bread and dried cherries while discussing defense of the Barrowlands. She found to her surprise that men listened not just out of loyalty but respect, because she matched them mile for mile, arrow for arrow, yet asked no more of them than she gave. Evenings belonged to Parchment. The Solar's high windows fogged with their breath as Sansa drafted letters between sips of cinnamon tea. Arya answered ravens from Bear Island and Old Castle, her script ungainly yet strengthening. Sometimes they argued over Sir Roderick's proposed taxes, or whether Carhold deserved full pardon after aiding Bolton forces. Their voices rose, sharp and familiar, but now the quarrels ended in compromise, not estrangement. They were two stones struck to spark the same fire. Rumors of their governance spread. From the stony fingers of Flint's lands and bog-shrouded Cranogs, clansmen came bearing pelts and oaths renewed. A company of stout spearmen marched from Widow's Watch to volunteer for the Wintertown Watch. Each new arrival carved another notch into the ledger of northern rebirth. Still, peace wore fragile skin. On the night of the first full moon of the year, the gates clanged open to admit a rider swaying atop a gaunt mare. Frost rimed the man's black cloak. His cheeks bore lash wounds not yet scabbed. He carried no sigil, only a tattered scrap of parchment clutched in one hand. In the great hall he collapsed before the dais, gasping that bandits flying flayed. Man banners had raided umber grain caravans bound for Winterfell, a ragged remnant of the Boltons, harrying from hidden dens. The news burned like a live coal in Arya's chest. She paced the hearthrug, the wolf heads on its weave seeming to move with her. Vengeance was a word she had worn thin through years of whispered lists, but now it surfaced, cold and steady. A responsibility, not a craving. She would not permit any more northern blood to feed the greed of flayers. At dawn, she summoned Sir Roderick, Sir Willis, and Lady Barbritadai. "We ride to recover the grain and the small folk they took," she declared, voice echoing beneath Winterfell's vaults. Sansa watched from the steps of the dais, silent but unwavering. "We ride under stark banners. No torches, no pillage, no needless deaths. We bring the lost ones home." Sir Roderick's grey brows knitted. "You mean to lead the column yourself, my lady?" "I do." "Then I stand at your side," he said, and a dozen voices rang after his in pledged accord. The march began beneath skies bruised with stormlight. Horse hooves cracked the crusted snow. Arya rode at the fore, Nymeria loping ahead like a harrow's shadow. They crossed the King's Road north, veered into thickets where spruce limbs bowed low, snow falling from branches at the brush of mail. On the second night, they camped by the shivering brook. The men huddled round log fires, but Arya walked the bank alone, hearing the brook beneath its sheet of ice, water calling to open paths beneath obstacles. By dawn scouts returned. The raiders laired in an abandoned mill by Breakstone Ridge. They held 30 captives, mostly Umbers, 3 children, a nursing mother. Bolton flayed man banners hung at the mill's broken window, like bloodied skins. The sight stiffened every Stark rider to steel. Arya studied the terrain. The ridge offered one narrow approach. A frontal charge would spook the captors into slaughtering hostages. She recalled her old lessons: Sirio's dancing, Yoren's cautions, the hound's blunt warcraft. She dispatched archers to the ridge crest with strict orders. 1 arrow per bandit guarding the hostage yard, loose on her signal only. A small unit flanked the mill's back door under Lady Barbry's lead. Arya herself led 8 riders up the frozen Millipond shallows. The ice boomed but held, muffling hoofalls. The horn call split the air, thin and distant. Just as the first arrow hissed, Arya kicked Sparrow into a silent gallop. An instant later she was off the saddle, boots crunching snow, needle drawn but aimed not to kill. Its point slashed ropes binding captives' wrists. A panicked bandit swung a mace toward her. She ducked, elbowed his gut, thumped his jaw with pommel. He crumpled unconscious. Another reached for a child. Arya's boot flashed, sweeping him to the ground where Sir Roderick's axe half pinned him. Not one fatal blow fell from her hand, though the Stark's archers dropped 4 men outright, arrow buried in shoulders and thighs. In the aftermath, the captives wept into her cloak. She felt their tears soak through cloth and deeper still, into marrow, sealing some old crack inside. This was why swords existed, not for revenge, but for rescue. They bound the surviving raiders and tore down the flayed man banners, burning them in a pyre whose smoke curled gray against the snow. The captives rode home on horses, loaned by Barbari's men. At the rear of the column, Arya walked on foot. Sparrow's reins slack over her arm. The air smelled of spruce resin and distant hearth fires, and somewhere near, Nymeria prowled, unseen, but felt. 3 days later, Winterfell's bells rang to welcome them. The townsfolk lined the gates, invoking her name not as myth, but as living shield. Lady Arya, Lady Wolf. Children touched her gloved hands in passing, marveling at the she-wolf that padded silent as snowfall beside her. In the yard, Sansa greeted the freed folk first, offering blankets and hot broth, her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall until each was tended. That night, the great hall thundered with song. The cooks roasted boar with apples and honey. Minstrels plucked lutes restrung after long neglect. Arya sat at the main table with Sir Roderick on one side, and Maester Colin on the other. Sansa nudged her when a gap in noise threatened. With reluctant grace, Arya rose and spoke. "I fought beside brothers and sisters today," she said, her voice carrying in the quiet between chords. "Not all of them bore Stark blood, but all bore northern hearts. The North remembers pain. Yet more than that, we must remember hope." She paused, hearing her own words echo back in timber and stone. "Winter is ours to endure, not to fear. In spring we will sow grain from these same wagons and bake bread sweeter, for having fought to reclaim it. As long as one of us stands for the other, we are unbroken." A hush followed, then cheers rolled like thunder on a distant plain. Cups struck tables in rhythm, feet stomped. In their noise, Arya glimpsed again that broken creature of Winterfell, mending. Its heart thumped louder now, vital. Much later, after the singing dwindled, she climbed the central tower where wind cut sharp and clean. The sky was brittle with stars. She leaned on the crenellations, breath steaming. Nymeria's silhouette appeared at her side, fur silvered in starlight. She twined fingers into the rough, feeling each inhalation. Steps scraped behind. Sansa approached, cloak swirling dark. Wordlessly she draped a folded quilt over Arya's shoulders. They stood together, eyes on the frozen world. "How far we've come," Sansa whispered. Arya nodded. "And how far to go?" "Jon will be proud," her sister said. "He'll scold me for riding into danger." Arya's lips curved. "Then, he'll understand." Sansa's hand rested lightly on hers. No more needed saying. Beneath them, the castle glowed amber from hearth fires. Beyond, the forest lay white and still. But within its hush wolves sang the old song, unbroken, unafraid. Arya closed her eyes. The air smelled of pine, of distant iron, of the long road still ahead, and of home finally, unfalteringly, hers. Morning crept pale through shutter slats, and Arya woke to distant hammers, a sound now as familiar as water on stone. She swung from the feather bed, still uncanny luxury after months on earth floors, and dipped chilled water from a ewer. The reflection in the basin surprised her. Features leaner, eyes clearer, a balm where once only anger lay. She dressed in plain gray wool breeches, laced a jerkin of cured elk hide and belted needle at her hip. Downstairs the kitchens buzzed like a hive. Pots clanged. Gage's wife directed lads hefting sacks of oats toward bread ovens already glowing. Arya pinched a sliver of apple from a peel bucket, receiving a mock frown. "See you sit at table proper, m'lady," the cook called after her. She grinned, wiping juice on her sleeve. The council reconvened at first candle. Reports came. The free embers sheltered under the winter town sept. Root cellars inventoried. A white shadow cat sighted near the Wolfswood edge. Sansa proposed sending rangers to confirm. Its fur would fetch coin, but myths said shadowcats stalking so close might portend whites fleeing deep snows. They agreed to dispatch scouts. As they dismissed, Maester Colrin held Arya back. "A message by Crow from Old Town," he murmured, handing her the scroll. The wax bore a sigil she did not know, a book open upon a sword. She broke the seal. The letter was brief, lines cramped but elegant. To Arya Stark, Lady of Winterfell. The Citadel notes with interest your reports of resurgent direwolves and the altered migratory patterns of ravens in northern skies. Archmaester Walgrave invites any Stark sworn to the old gods to contribute further observations concerning omens and the long night. Should you find time amid your duties, we request your written account. In light of grim news from the far north, knowledge shared may save countless lives. Under the light of the Seven, or any gods you prefer. Maester Theron, scribe of beasts and portents. Arya folded the parchment, uneasy. From Joan's last raven, she knew the Night's Watch stood wary. Wildlings spoke of dead villages, empty as broken shells north of the wall. If archmaesters sought lore now, dread roved the south too. She pushed thoughts aside. Duty here first. Rebuild, strengthen. Let the Citadel wait a while for her words. That afternoon, she journeyed to the marketplace outside the walls. Stalls of tanned hides and smoked fish clustered under patched awnings. Children chased one another through slush, giggling. A heart tree carver from Hornwood displayed miniature weirwoods shaped from bone. Their painted red leaves so delicate Arya almost feared to breathe near them. She bought two, one for Bran, if ever he returned, one for the library shelf. At a smithy stall, she watched a girl about 10 smith sparks off a horseshoe while her father guided the hammer swing. The sight stirred memory. Years earlier, Arya at that age had begged Mikken to allow her a try. But then fear of father's lecture cooled her resolve. She lingered, appreciating the skill, until the father noticed and bowed. "My lady," he stammered, "a humble trinket for a Stark." He thrust forward a small iron figurine shaped like a running wolf, rough but honest work. Arya accepted, pressing a silver stag into his palm despite protest. As she walked on, she tucked the figurine inside her glove, a reminder of the pack she led. Twilight brought rosy gold bands across the sky. Arya rode Sparrow along the old hunter's path, skirting the ponds, Nymeria pacing ahead. Snow muffled hoofbeats. The trees whispered of age. An owl launched from a fir, wings silent. The world felt poised, balanced. She reined in at the top of a small rise. Below stretched fields where dark earth peeked through drifts, readying for spring. If she squinted, she could imagine rows of barley already nodding under sun, the grain sent forth to every corner of a healed north. She inhaled crisp air thick with promise. Behind her, Sparrow nickered, ears swiveling. Arya sensed it too. Footsteps. She turned. A boy emerged, thin, hair like shadow, carrying a satchel too heavy for his narrow frame. His cheeks flushed red, but he held his head high. "My lady Arya?" His voice cracked. "I bring news from the Barrowlands. Lord Dustin sends word." "Easy." She dismounted, letting her presence diminish rather than loom. "Walk with me." He exhaled relief, adjusting the satchel. Skirmish at the Saltpans Trail, he rushed on. Unknown riders harrying small folk. Lord Dustin asks aid. Arya felt weight shift on the chessboard of duties. Another fire to quell. How many riders? Did they bear sigils? Perhaps all. Black banners, no mark, he said. They struck at dusk and vanished. She pressed lips thin. Could be Sel's words adrift, or worse, scouts for foes to come. Either way, Winterfell would answer. She took the boy's satchel, lightened his burden. Rest tonight. Eat hearty. You'll ride back with our escort at dawn, Toncio. He nodded, admiration warring with fatigue. As they began the return path, she glanced skyward. Daylight bled away. Stars hinted already in indigo vault. In their silent flicker, she imagined father, mother, Robb. Stars guiding her steps, not demanding blood, but insisting on stewardship. She would ride to the Barrowlands, yes. And after that to the Wolfswood, should whites crawl south. And after that, wherever her people needed. She was no assassin slipping from shadow to shadow. She was the point of the pack, the first snowflake that told of storm, yet also of spring to follow. For a moment she closed her eyes. Nymeria brushed her side, a warm solidity. Sparrow whickered, eager for hearth. Somewhere ahead, Winterfell's torches began to glow, a constellation on earth guiding her homeward. She stepped forward into their light. The wolf in her heart, the girl of water dancers and half-remembered prayers, the lady in gray wool, each paced in harmony. They were going to make this castle live again. They would teach the world that the North's truest strength was not in swords drawn for vengeance, but in hands extended across snow, building, mending, guiding. And when the long night finally drew its cloak over the lands, it would find the hearths of Winterfell burning high, tended by a lady who answered darkness not with a kill, but with a light no shadow could quench. And that, Arya Stark promised herself beneath the deepening sky, would be enough. Ka. Snow fell in a hush, so complete it seemed to swallow the crunch of the column's boots, the creak of saddle leather, even the soft wheeze of the sledge hauling barrels of lantern oil behind the rear guard. Arya rode near the vanguard, Sparrow's nostrils blowing twin plumes of mist into the violet air. Dawn hovered invisible behind clouds, smearing the sky a bruised plum gray. Ahead rose Breakneck Ridge, a long white hump spiked with limbless birches, their trunks black as wet ink. Somewhere beyond that ridge lay the Saltpans Trail, and the raiders who had struck Lord Dustin's wagons. They advanced at a measured walk, never faster, conserving strength. A dozen spearmen marched on foot before the mounted knights, boots wrapped in oiled leather against frostbite. Behind them clopped the horse archers, behind those the supply sledges, and at flank Nymeria padded, paws silent, snout lifting now and again to test currents of wind. The direwolf's presence steadied the men more than any trumpet or banner. Men who had never stood in the same yard with a wolf, larger than a pony, walked easier for having her shadow beside them. Mid-morning they crested the ridge and sighted the Saltpans Trail, a skinny white scar threading a valley cut by frozen streams. Broken carts littered the verge. Split barrels lay with black grain bleeding onto snow. A dead mule stiffened where it had fallen, glazed by hoarfrost. No smoke curled from the forest beyond. No banner snapped. But Arya felt eyes on her skin as one feels sleet begin before the first sting. Sir Roderick conferred with scouts and pointed at a wedge of dark pines half a league distant. If they fled that way, he said. His beard wore a shelf-like beard of ice below his chin. Tracks show 24 mounted, dragging sledges. His gloved finger tapped the ruined grain. If they mean to keep hitting wagons, they'll hug the tree line north, skirt the King's Road, then wheel back toward the Barrowlands. Wolves after sheep. We are wolves after the wolves after sheep, Arya answered, too quietly for all but Sir Roderick to hear. She brushed Sparrow's mane, considering the lay of the country. The valley floor opened into a cattail marsh iced solid, broken by hummocks of brittle reeds. Beyond, a low escarpment studded with granite coils. Perfect place for an ambush. She remembered hound-taught lessons. Never chase a foe who knows the ground better unless you make the ground lie for you. They left the column to Sir Wylis' oversight, and rode with a hand-picked knot of 6. Quiet men, light horses, Nymeria ranging ahead as their nose. The marsh ice crackled but held. A gust took the wolfskin hood from Arya's head, tangling hair across her cheeks. She let it stream behind rather than slow. The thrill of stalk rode her blood. Needle lay sheathed, but the weight of it reminded her she carried a pack's will now, not a lone cub's anger. Nymeria halted suddenly, tail strayed. Arya swung down beside her, laying one palm on the wolf's withers. The forest ahead breathed wood smoke. Not the thick billows of a camp with watchfires. No, this was a guttering cook flame, a hideout trying to stay small. She motioned the men into a half circle. They slid free of saddles. Snow grated under greaves. Sir Roderick pressed a horn-hafted dagger into the hands of young Torrhen Talltree, who bore only bow and hatchet. No killing if you can cut ropes instead, the old knight reminded them. They ghosted through pines. Arya felt each footfall before it landed, placing weight where patches of lichen showed through snow, where fallen needles cushioned the crunch. She counted heartbeats. 1 dozen, 2. A clearing opened, ringed by cedars. At its center slouched a canvas lean-to, smoke curling from a rent. Horses stood hobbled along a makeshift line, heads drooping, coats mud-flecked. Men in half-armor squatted near the lean-to, passing a flask. Their banners, black squares, lay bundled beneath packs. One corner showed pink where a flayed man had been hastily inked out. Arya signaled. 2 archers melted wide. She waited until the sun reached the lowest branch of a fir, then let out one sharp whistle. Nymeria leapt first, a gray streak. An archer loosed, arrow thunking into a bandit's thigh before the man could stand. Shouts pitched. Arya darted, cutting through smoke stench. Needle pricked a wrist, lifting a dirk. The knife clanged down harmless. She kicked it aside, pressing her blade flat against the man's throat until his eyes blurred with fear. She did not push. Torrin hacked saddle lines. Horses screamed free. Sir Roderick and Barbry's nephew disarmed 2 raiders with wooden cudgels, beating gloved fists until they yielded. It was shockingly swift. When the last man dropped to knees, bleeding from ear where Nymeria's teeth had torn, Arya called a halt. By count, they had seized 9 living, 2 wounded near death. No grain wagons though, only sacks of smoked eel and a half-full strongbox of small coin. Arya stalked the captives. "What flag flies for you?" Silence, a mutinous slash of mouth. Nymeria growled. One man's resolve cracked. "Bolton at first," he rasped. "But the flayer's dead. We're swore to coin now." "Menin." Coin bought with burnt farms and stolen bread. "Bread's bread," another spat. Arya knelt before him, resting needle tip against his palm. "Say that again when your mother is hungry," she said, low. Then, rising, she addressed Sir Roderick. "Bind them. They pull our sleighs home." As the men were secured, she searched tents, turning over bedrolls. Beneath one she found a scrap of parchment, stamped with a broken wax lump. "Flayed man." The inked words listed supply routes from Barrowton to Widow's Watch. It bore a fresh date, only 5 days old, and a sigil beside the route list she did not know. 3 crown daggers. She pocketed it. New players on the board. They rejoined the column by dusk. The captives trudged roped behind the sledges. Nymeria nosed them now and again, keeping pace. Sir Willis greeted Arya with frank awe. The men cheered once, but she lifted one gloved hand for quiet, for this was no triumph, merely pruning of poison. That night, they camped beneath cliff overhang, sheltering them from wind that howled like a sea gale. Arya kept first watch, seated on a block of stone with blanket round her shoulders, listening to sparks hiss from the central fire. Nymeria curled at her feet. The moon rolled out from cloud and painted the ridge silver. Arya thought of the parchment and the crown daggers, and wondered who else schemed for northern roads. South of Moat Cailin, warlords sprouted like nettles after rain. Joan's letters said as much. But this mark felt nearer, colder. She would consult Maester Corran. When Sir Willis rose to relieve her, she yielded the watch and walked until the fire's glow vanished behind rock. Alone, she inhaled the night, pine resin, horse sweat, distant water under ice. Her pulse slowed. She remembered standing on the deck of a Braavosi ship, dreaming of home. She was home now, and with home came endless work. Yet she felt no dread, only a gravity that aligned her bones like the run of veins in stone. She slept 3 hours, rose at false dawn, and led the march back. No raider troubled them. The captives limped in exhausted silence. Not one attempt at escape. Nymeria's pale eyes ensured that. 2 days later, Winterfell's towers loomed, and bells rang. A welcome wagon met them. Stable boys with hot mash for horses, grooms bearing thick cloaks, Sansa at their head with a jug of mulled cider and a stern set to her mouth that melted when she saw Arya whole. They clasped forearms, foreheads touched in quiet greeting. No need for words under curious gazes. Within the hour, the captives were led to the dungeon cells to await judgment. Arya ordered them fed broth and poultice treated. Then she and Sansa retired to the solar with the parchment. Sansa studied the crown daggers. "I know this," she murmured, brow furrowed. "I saw it in King's Landing, on a sellsword company out of Tyrosh. The Golden Dagger Triad, they called themselves. Half rogues, half spice traders turned cutthroats. Last I heard they sailed west when Joffrey died." "West to our shores," Arya said. "Someone courts them. Gold, grain, and promises." Sansa sighed. "We'll send ravens. Lord Manderley will know if any ships bearing dagger pennants docked at White Harbor." Arya poured cider. "We must hurry. Spring's thaw will free every river path." "Then bring Jon's army south," Sansa suggested. "Let the king in the north ride home." But news from the wall proved grimmer. A raven arrived 3 days later. Jon scarce repelled a walking dead assault on Eastwatch, cost heavy. He would not leave until sure the castles between Shadow Tower and Eastwatch held. Arya read the spidery script thrice, each time hearing exhaustion between strokes. She longed to saddle Sparrow and fly to him, but the parchment's scratches circled her wrists like an oath. "Old Winterfell," she answered with crisp lines. "Winterfell stands. Bannermen muster, grain secured. Direwolf at the gate." She spared him the crown dagger worry. Burdens enough on that wall of ice. Snowstorms rolled thick thereafter. Days shrank to flecks of light between long blue nights. And in those nights, Winterfell pressed on its mending. Arya oversaw the reseeding of the broken glass garden. Sheared oak, named A benches, replaced charred remnants. The Godswood pool, once choked by soot, shone black and still again under ice, holding moon reflections like quiet secrets. The Umber children rescued from Breakstone grew strong in the castle's schoolroom. Arya visited often, kneeling beside them as Septa Marcena taught letters. Curve of O like a shield rim, straight back of T like a spear. The littlest, Brinna, once stammered each vowel. Now she recited the names of the kings of winter with bright confidence. When she stumbled on Theon Stark, who dared the Kraken King, Arya whispered the word into her ear, and the girl grinned, gap-toothed. One frozen mid-afternoon, Arya sparred in the yard with Sir Wylis, using blunted steel. Spearmen gathered to watch the ladies dancing. Snow hissed under their boots as they circled. The big man lumber graceful, Arya whip lean. His first overhand cut, she sidestepped, tapping his gauntlet with needle's kiss. Cheers rose. Wylis grunted, adjusting. The second exchange lasted longer. A faint low, a slash high, a clanging parry that numbed her wrist. She rolled, came up inside his guard, and set needle at his collar. He froze. Applause clattered. Breathing hard, he bowed. "Your wrist?" he asked, low. "Fine," she said, but flexed fingers later in her chamber. The joint throbbed. She thought of the hound's old warning, "Every bout steals something from your body," and smiled, for she was not sorry. Fighting here was not destructive. It forged trust. Supper that night saw her seated beside Lord Serwyn, newly arrived with 30 bowmen for Winterfell's garrison. He spoke of iron deposits discovered in foothills long left idle, of building a small foundry come spring. Arya pledged Smith's aid. When the musicians began a slow reel, Sansa coaxed Arya to dance, and to everyone's surprise, including Arya's, she did, turning steps learned at King Robert's welcome feast years ago. People clapped in time. The air smelled of juniper, roasted chestnut, and hope. On the morrow, the White Harbor ravens arrived. One bore confirmation. A Tyroshi carrack had indeed anchored, its ledgers listing mercenary specialities, no slaves. Lord Manderley seized its captain for questioning. Under Truthwine, the man confessed the Golden Dagger Triad had contracted with an unnamed northern lord, promising unrestricted pillage so long as it targeted Stark supply lines. Manderley's letter named suspicion but no proof. Lord Risewell, long resentful, perhaps House Slate, bankrupted by war. Arya bawled the parchment. Traitors yet walked halls that had eaten Stark bread. She convened council in the great hall, torches crackling. Lords Dustin, Serwyn, Manderley's son Wylis, Lady Mage Mormont come by sled escort, even Galbart Glover fresh from Deepwood. They argued names, motives, blood prices. Arya listened, fingertip tracing the dire wolf carved in the arm of father's old seat. At length she rose and spoke clear. "Suspect all, trust none, we rot. We will root this weed by deeds." She proposed an open assembly at Winterfell 3 weeks hence. Every bannerman, no matter how small, must swear renewed fealty before the heart tree, drinking winter ale stirred with wolfswood ash, an oath ceremony older than Andal's, said to choke false tongues. Those who refused would mark themselves. The lords murmured at such ancient rite, but Sir Roderick rapped the table in support, and Lady Mormont growled assent. The motion carried. Preparations began. Casks of the bitter oath ale were brewed under Maester Corran's supervision, dark malt steeped with sacred ash and a single drop of weirwood sap. Invitations rode on wing and on rider. Wintertown swelled as retinues arrived dragging sledges of pig, salted cod, hemp rope, and sonic booms of gossip. Tents blossomed in concentric rings beyond the gates. Smoke plumed skyward. Children slid on frozen ponds wearing bits of embroidered ribbon gift from Sansa's ladies, each striped the color of a visiting house. Arya scarcely slept. She inspected gatehouses, walked battlements with crossbow in hand at dawn, oversaw torch-lit weapon drills at dusk. Nymeria followed step for step. Once, approaching the kennels, they found the direwolf pups wrestling with the Skagos wolf dogs, all clumsy paws and mock snarls. Arya knelt, scratching behind ears. The smallest pup, white except one soot-black sock, latched onto her mitten and refused to let go until she laughed. She named him Snowfall. On the eve of the assembly a storm rolled in, a hush like world's breath held. Then snow by the foot. Hundreds huddled in halls as wind sounded cathedral organs through cracks. Trapped servants diced by candlelight, knights sharpened blades they hoped not to need. Through it all, Arya roamed, cloak streaming, calming quarrels, hauling wood, setting boys to clear drifts before door arches. She felt alive as only in movement, a mobile center, hearthfire on legs. At last morning broke clear, blue as tempered glass above a world frosted white. The gods' wood lay pristine. Crimson leaves quivered under frost, each droplet catching sun, scattering rubies into snow. The heart tree's face seemed sterner than she remembered, perhaps approving severity for the right to come. Sansa stood beneath its boughs in gray wool, trimmed with silver thread, a circlet around her red-gold hair. Beside her, Maester Corran cradled a bowl of oath ale. Samplers had tested for poison. Still, Arya caught Sansa's eye and nodded once before taking her place opposite. Flanked by Sir Roderick and Lady Mormont, they waited. Trumpets announced first arrival. House Glover in green-checked cloaks, boots crunching. Men knelt, palms on hearts, drank, spoke the words. "By ice and earth, by moon and sun, by the blood that beats cold or warm, I am true to Winterfell, or let Winterfell consume me." They tipped bowls. The ale's bitter tang twisted faces, but none spat. One by one banners advanced. Serwyn Bluebear, Tall Heart Pine, Mormont's Black Bear larger than life. Each drank, each swore. By midday 24 houses had pledged. Arya's chest loosened with every vow. Then rode in Riswell retainers, men in dun riding leathers, pale horse banners snapping. Lord Ryswell himself dismounted stiff-legged, eyes narrow. He bowed shallowly, but bowed. When handed the cup, he sniffed, lips curling. The heart tree creaked overhead. Arya watched. Ryswell tilted the cup and drank. No tremor, no choke. He spoke the words. Still, her neck prickled. His gaze afterward felt too calm. House Slate came last, their numbers thinned, banners torn at edges. Their Lady Anya stepped forward, silver hair unbound, sorrow etched. She drank without hesitation, voice ringing clear on oath. Glimmers of relief rippled through the crowd. When all swearing ended, Arya addressed them. She spoke of unity sharper than Valyrian steel, of grain stores open in famine, of swords drawn only in defense of northern life. She spread her arms to the pillars of red-leaved trees. "The old gods heard your oaths," she said. "So did I. Together we will stand whether winds blow blue with ice or red with war. Every house is the north, every hearth fire one coal and ice." Cheers answered, less rowdy than the rescued grain feast, but deeper, older. People clasped forearms, clapped shoulders. Snow fell then, soft as ash, drifting onto upturned faces like a benediction. Supper that night filled every hall. Tables groaned with boar, steamed turnips, lake trout crusted with pine nuts. Musicians from White Harbor sang ballads of the kings of winter, then switched to reels that sent even Lady Dustin stamping lines on the rushes. Torches flared, mead flowed. Nymeria dozed content beneath the dais, huge head on paws. Arya sat with Sansa and Lady Mormont, watching the dance. It felt almost like the winter feast of her childhood, just before King Robert arrived and shattered the world. Yet she knew the shattering had forged something harder in its glad ruin, steel stronger for temper. She leaned toward her sister. "We did well," she said. "You did," Sansa replied. "I followed." Arya shook her head, but Sansa pressed fingers to her wrist. "Follow, lead." Both feet of one stride. After the feast, while the castle slept in mead-heavy stupor, Arya walked the ramparts. Moonlight crusted roofs in silver. Beyond the walls, campfires winked, like stars come down to rest. From this height, Winterfell seemed enormous, a beating mass of stone and flesh life. She felt small and vast at once, one heartbeat among 1,000, yet carrying them all. Footsteps approached. She turned to find Gendry Baratheon. No, Gendry Waters still to most, fresh off the winter-dark road, cowl rimed with frost. He carried a half-wrapped parcel and a smile that collapsed into shyness when their eyes met. "Thought I'd missed the oats," he said, voice rough from cold. "Almost, Guy." She stepped forward, grasped his forearm. He smelled of forge smoke and pine tar. The smiths at Deepwood teach slow. Slow as goats. He offered the parcel. "For you." Inside lay a dagger-length blade of rippled steel, not Valyrian but pattern-welded, etched with swirling wolves along the fuller. The grip was polished weirwood, pale red streaks and grain. She turned it in torchlight. Awed. Gendry shrugged. "Figured every lady needs a little fang besides the big bite." He nodded at Needle. "That one sings. This one growls. I love it," she said simply, and strapped it to her belt opposite Needle. Balance felt perfect. He flushed, kicked snow off a boot. "They say you've become a proper lady of letters and ledgers. And marsh scuffles," she added. "You'll hear tale." "Already have. A shield as thick as your head." She laughed in a burst that steamed the air. They walked the wall side by side, speaking of small things, iron prices, new foals, stories of children learning smith hammers at Deepwood. When Nymeria padded up, Gendry bowed, mock solemn. "My lady," he said to the wolf. And Nymeria bumped his thigh hard enough he nearly toppled. Later, candlelight haloed the corridor. Outside, Arya's chamber. She turned to Gendry. "Rest near the forge in the east yard," she said. "Need you to oversee spearhead orders at dawn." He nodded, half-smile still trembling. "Aim, lady." She touched her gloved fingers to his cheek, quick, fierce, hardly thinking, then withdrew. "Good night." Behind her door she leaned against wood, pulse hammering stranger than in battle. A new terror, a new joy. The next weeks blurred in hush of snow and roar of work. Gendry's forging sang day and night. Sparks lit his face scarlet. He devised a riveted lamellar breastplate for light infantry, slicing weight by a quarter yet turning an arrow point. Arya tested the first piece with a bodkin shot from 5 paces. The point dented but stopped. She declared production for every youth in the Wintertown militia. At dusk, she and Gendry sometimes walked the Godswood paths, boots squeaking crystal crust. They talked of bastards' rights, of royal bastards crowned by deed, of how a name could fetter or free. Beside the pool, he told her of Robert's drunken ghost that followed him like a wheezing bear. She told him of faces worn in Bravos, and how none fit as well as Stark. They parted always at the archway, breath mingling, each step away heavier than the one before. In late moon of the 3rd month, Ravens blackened the sky. One bore Joan's sigil. Arya read it before the council, voice steady though her hands trembled. Dead things amass at the gorge. We ride to stop breach. Pray for dawn within fortnight. Send every able arrow. Below the script, a tight postscript. If north falls, Winterfell stands last safe place. Hold it. The hall fell silent but for crack of hearth log. Arya raised her gaze. Send half our archers and 60 barbed shafts each, she ordered. Horses fresh shod, they leave within 2 days. Arya, our walls. Sir Roderick began. Will remain manned, she cut gently. We send enough to matter, not enough to bleed ourselves white. Muttered assent. That night, she walked the courtyard until frost rimed her eyelashes. Jon's words echoed. Last safe place. She pictured White Walkers cresting the hills, their ice spears stabbing moonlight. Fear moved in her belly like trapped bird. She pushed it down and kept walking until dawn turned the night edges silver. Preparations for war accelerated the castle's pulse. Kilns blazed, arrow shafts fletched. Ravens flew in meter like orders of breath. Yet daily life intertwined. Bryna Umber lost her first tooth, weeping until Arya knelt and commended her bravery. 2 builders wet at the sept, hauling each other laughing through drifts. Snowfall the wolf pup chewed Lady Sansa's fur-lined boot, earning a shriek and then helpless laughter. Across every face, Arya read the truth. People choose to live even under sword-tipped shadow. That choice itself is defiance. When the archers marched, Gendry led them, hammer slung beside a borrowed short sword, breastplate of his own make gleaming. At dawn's amber he clasped Arya's hands beneath the gatehouse. I'll come back with ugly stories, he said. Come back alive, she replied. Nymeria raised her muzzle, ululated a farewell that trembled stone. The company rode off into breath white as ghosts. Arya watched until the last banner vanished. Day slowed again. Without the forge ring the castle felt too quiet. Yet work remained. She trained new recruits, inspected grain once more, trailed Sansa through weaving barns pricing boltcloth for surcoats. At night she wrote in the ledger of portents for the citadel, detailing raven migrations and dire wolf howls that now sounded every twilight from 3 corners of Wolfswood. One icy evening a courier arrived breathless. Jon's army pinned the dead at the gorge but needed pitch. Arya ordered every barrel, supervised filling. She wrote Jon, the north answers with fire. She added one line beneath. I remember the taste of lemon cakes and the sound of your laughter under the hot sun at Winterfell's pond. Come home to hear it again. She sealed with gray wax. Weeks crept. Snowstorms eased. Sun lingered longer each afternoon, though air stayed razor cold. With melt season near, Arya planned river patrols, oversaw bridge plank inspections. Every task felt a prayer for Jon's return. It came in the first flush of thaw. Doubts sighted riders, black-cloaked, approaching at dusk. Bells tolled. Arya and Sansa raced to the gatehouse as the portcullis groaned up. Through slush rode a column, gaunt with fatigue. Lances burned black at tips. Jon Snow led them, gray cloak tattered, longclaw strapped across his back. His eyes lit like hearth embers when he saw his sisters. He dismounted stiffly, armor creaking, and Arya leapt the last stairs to throw arms around him. They clung, silent. She felt ribs, too many, but pulse, strong. Inside, the great hall erupted. Hornblowers sounded, townsfolk wept. Jon addressed them plainly. Wall held, dead in retreat for now, but southern lords must rally. He named Arya and Sansa saviors of the north for unity one. Cheers crashed. Later, alone near the hearth, Jon told Arya how her pitch barrels torched the ice bridge, searing whites by hundreds. Her heart soared then sobered. Victory was never final. Gendry returned 3 days after Jon, arm in sling but grinning crooked. The reunion with Arya beneath the smithy eaves lasted no longer than a breath before she dragged him to the maester for stitches, scalding tears in her eyes. He endured smirking. Later, under the old ash tree by the training yard, they said nothing for long minutes, foreheads touching, breaths mingling like one exhale. Spring broke at last. Snowmelt roared in culverts, turning Wintertown lanes to muddy rivers. Crocuses speared earth with violet, gold, white. Farmers seeded barley in black loam. Smithy smoke thinned, sweet with green wood instead of pitch pine. On the first truly warm afternoon, Arya removed her gloves beside the heart tree and pressed bare fingers to its bark. Sap rose, sticky, smelling of earth and blood of the old gods. She thought of everything buried here. Her father's silent prayers, her mother's gentle laughter, Rob's boyish boasts, and of everything grown anew. Children learning letters, a wolf pup chasing butterflies, a sister's steady counsel, a lover's shy grin, a whole people's courage. She whispered again her vow, no longer raw. I am Arya of House Stark, Lady of Winterfell, Shield of the North. No killer's hunger guides me, only a guardian's heart. The leaves rustled overhead, and for a moment the breeze carried words in Father's voice. That is enough, little wolf. She opened her eyes, smiling through tears. From the gate below floated the hubbub of traders arriving. Olive oil from Bravos, carpets dyed sunset red, rumors of kings quarreling in the south. Life pressed in, thick and bright. Soon she would ride inspections to Widow's Watch, oversee the rebuilding of the Dreadfortress Hospital, judge a dispute over grazing rights between House Wolffield and the Silent Sisters farm. She would spar at dawn, draft letters at dusk, and fall asleep with Nymeria curled at her hearth and Gendry's newest forged trinket winking on the bedside table. She would hold Winterfell. The nightfall bells began to ring. Arya lifted her new dagger, the weirwood grip warm in her palm, and traced its edge against a beam of red-gold light slanting from the setting sun. She sheathed it beside Needle. Two blades, one a memory of wild flight, one a promise of steadfast guardianship. Balanced perfectly, she stepped from the godswood, cloak billowing like a gray wing in the gentle evening wind, and made her way toward the glowing windows of the great hall where her people waited. Faces upturned, hands ready, hearts beating the old fierce rhythm of a north that remembers its wounds, yet chooses, stubbornly and gloriously, to live. And in that living, she found her truest psalm, not of death, but of enduring light. Ka. The first larks of spring flew over Winterfell at dawn, their silhouettes stitching a faint melody into a sky soft with pale gold. Arya stood on the eastern battlements as the day's first warmth slipped across her face. The stones beneath her palms had shed their sheath of frost for the first time, weeping thin beads of melt that glittered like dew. Far below, the courtyards bustled in rhythms half forgotten during the long white months. Cartwheels rattling over flagstones, men whistling as they toggled harness buckles, the high, bright laughter of children let loose from winter lessons. It might have been any innocent morning in the northern archives of her memory, save for the banners hanging over the outer gate, doubled now, direwolf and the new sigil, freshly raised by Jean's decree. A single white torch on gray field, meant to signify watchers at the walls of winter. The torch reminded every traveler who entered that, beyond the green edge of spring, lay an empire of ice still stirring with dead hearts. From the rampart, Arya could see as far as the horse paddocks where Nymeria stalked around Snowfall and the two younger direwolf pups. Their rough play flurried soil and straw, but the stable boys, once terrified, worked easily among them now, a testament to months of patience. She watched the wolves a moment longer, then turned toward the stair that spiraled down into stone. Jon awaited her below, gauntleted hands clasped behind his back, gaze following the slow rise of a rebuilt crane, lifting new ramp boards into place. Morning shafted off the silver rings at his throat and transformed him again into the boy she had once flung snowballs at, if only for the heartbeat it took her to cross the yard. "Sleep?" he asked. Her shrug was answer enough. "I thought you meant to ride for White Harbor today." "Delayed. Archers from Castle Serwyn arrived at dawn. I need them folded into the muster rolls before I leave." He paused, scanning her face. "And you, little sister?" She ignored the nickname. "I promised Maester Colron I'd review the seed stores in the East Loft. We still don't know how fast the barley will germinate after this winter. If we're short, I'll negotiate with the Hornwoods. Lady Cybele says her fields are sprouting like weeds." Arya allowed herself a smirk. "And then I'll spar with Gendry so he can brag to the newcomers that the Lady of Winterfell bruised his ribs a second time. Jon chuckled, breath steaming in the cool air. 7. Save him. Yet his smile dimmed as swiftly. I'll miss this place the whole ride south. She rested a hand on his arm. Come back quickly. Word from the Citadel said archmaesters quarreled all winter about whether dragonglass dust can truly blunt white blades. Who else will settle that for them but the king in the north? He snorted and tugged his glove tight. I'm no scholar. Scholar or not, thou listen to the man who burned 3 dead giants in one night. I had help, he reminded her. Well, help is all any Stark ever has, Jon. She tightened her fingers and then released him. Ride safe. The wagon train rattled out after noon. Banners snapping, iron-shod wheels cracking the half-frozen mud. Crossbow cranks squealing under new tension. Jon led on a dapple gray gelding, cloak pinned with a chunk of ice-blue quartz the wildlings sent south as a gift. Sansa stood beside Arya at the gate, hair caught by the capricious wind, eyes shining though dry. He's thinner, Sansa murmured. So are we, Arya said. They watched until the last glint of armor disappeared into the break of pines where the King's Road curled downhill. Then, with a mutual breath, they turned back into the living fortress. Spring unfolded by inches so small, the castle measured them in tasks. The first puddle, a mason could step across without cracking crust. The first morning no one layered, felt inside their boots. The day smoke from the charcoal flats smelled of damp loam instead of ice. Each shift brought new labor. On the second week of thawing, Arya inspected the grain lofts. She climbed a ladder rung by rung, head ducking to a gloom fragrant with oats, mildew, and mouse droppings. Candles winked from iron hooks, their flames pendulous with drafts. Bent back Mathis, the steward, followed puffing behind her, slate tucked under one arm. South Bend's bottom slats are cracked, my lady, he wheezed. We packed straw, but rats'll chew through come warm weeks. Arya crouched, pushing gloved fingers into the mound. Kernel husks pricked under the nails. She pinched half a dozen grains, split one with her thumbnail, sniffed. It's sweet yet. We'll shift what's left to the west loft, then burn the south bin clean and tar the boards. Mappins? Mathis opened his mouth, perhaps to mention the strain on laborers already pledged to field tilling, but saw something in her face and nodded. I'll have it done. She wrote orders herself after descending, 2 carpenters from Glover's men detailed to the loft alteration. 3 scythesmiths, retasked to traps for vermin. Efficient, precise, necessary. The work robbed her of hours, but sharpened her sense of what Winterfell needed to breathe. That evening she, Sansa, and Maester Colrin dined with Lady Barbary Dustin, Lord Glover, and the newly arrived Lady Anya Slate in the small hall. Gendry arrived late, smelling of hot iron, and slid into the space Arya saved between her chair and the wall. The meal was smoked trout in parsley butter, carrots roasted with honey, and barley bread. Halfway through, Colrin produced a scroll sealed in midnight wax. Another raven from Old Town, he announced, wiping fingers. Archmaester Walgrave desires an accounting of night howls claimed along the Barrowton marshes. He includes diagrams, rather fanciful, of northern constellations none of our charts recognize. In? Lady Barbary snorted into her cup. The Citadel would sooner map clouds than muddy boots. Yet Arya unfolded the parchment under candlelight. Walgrave's marginalia intrigued her, loops and spirals marking the sky like a riddle. They may sense something, she said over the rim. Every night this week Nymeria gone to the Wolfswood edge and howled until the Dawnstar shows. Sansa delicately sipped wine. Wolves smell spring stags, that's all. Arya shook her head. This is a warning voice. Barbary leaned forward. Then, follow it. Gendry shifted beside Arya. If you go, I'm going too. Sansa Spoon paused. Arya can't gallivant on midnight hunts. Half the north sends envoys weekly. Envoys can wait a night, Arya said, surprising even herself with the certainty that thickened her throat. If there's something in those woods unsettling a direwolf, better I find it before it pads to our walls. Glover nodded grim agreement. I'll loan 2 of my best foresters. No, Arya said. Silent shadows only. Nymeria will hear 6 heartbeats as clearly as one. Dynamordem. Late that night, moon peering through ragged cloud, she dressed in soft duskin, left needle on its peg, and strapped her pattern-welded dagger crosswise at the spine. Gendry met her by the old well, black-haired and broad-shouldered, leather jerkin laced but no breastplate, a shadow among deeper shadows. "Sure you want this walk?" she asked. He shrugged. "Sure as I'm breathing." Nymeria emerged from darkness as they passed through the Hunter's Gate, bulk slipping noiselessly across frosted turf. She bumped Arya's hip, then looked ahead. It was enough. They followed the wolves swaying back, crossed the winter-bare orchards, then the snow-churned outer moats, and entered the forest where manor-born hunters seldom treaded even in high summer. Under pines, the world stank of old needles and thawing humus. Wind hissed through black limbs, but every other sound seemed stolen. No owls, no scurrying vole, only the far-distant thunder of meltwater smashing loose ice in the river crooks. After a mile, Nymeria halted, hackles erect. Arya and Gendry froze, melting into the trunks. Ahead lay a clearing flooded by ghost-colored moon. At its center rose a stone slab half collapsed into moss, old as the first men by the look, rune channels filled with puddled snowmelt that reflected the sky's rags of cloud. Nymeria growled. Something moved on the far side of the slab. A figure, too tall for a man, limbs gaunt and pale as old chalk, stepped into argent light. Its hair hung in ropes, eyes filmed white. Yet it was no white, for it breathed, chest rising in painful increments, steam feathering from cracked lips. Arya felt the air drop to icicle pricks. She drew her dagger but did not rush. Nymeria prowled a semicircle, tail stiff, snarling. A second form emerged, smaller, cloaked. The first lifted a trembling arm. Moon off its forearm glinted mirror bright. Metal. No. Bone polished to shimmer. Something about the gesture was not hostile. Arya's racing heart slowed half a beat. She raised her free hand in answer. "Who are you?" she whispered. The smaller figure flung back its hood. Pale hair spilled, framing a young woman's face gray with travel. She spoke rapid, low speech, Arya barely recognized from old tongues scribbled in Maester Luwin's margins. Children of the forest dialect, maybe, twisted by centuries. The cadence sounded like wind through threads. "I don't know those words," Arya responded. She stepped forward, ignoring Gendry's hissed protest. Dagger downward, palms open. "The dire wolf leads true. Why are you in my woods?" The tall creature's gaze flickered, not wholly human. It tapped its own chest thrice, then pointed to Nymeria, then to Arya. "He says blood knows blood," the young woman translated suddenly. "In common, though accent slurred. And that your wolf carries the old song." "Who are you?" Arya repeated. "Leaf blood daughter. Name doesn't travel well." The girl placed a hand upon the tall one's wrist. "We came south of ice looking for fire wielders, but we find stone instead." "I wield no stone," Arya said, confusion mingling with intrigue. The tall creature inhaled a ragged lungful, then spoke a single harsh syllable that puffed white. The girl grimaced, translating. "He says winter's shadow splits. One branch crooks north, one bends here. He needs see the stark heart. Destiny talking. And if we refuse?" Gendry stepped beside Arya, hammer raised though no forge roared. The creature bowed its head as though understanding. "Then he sleeps in river ice until the shadow burns the roots." The translation cracked on the girl's tongue. Arya weighed every lesson of war, every caution of politics. Weighed also the certainty that the old powers of the world toss mortal caution aside like seeds in wind. She made her choice as surely as she once leapt from the Red Keep stairwell. "Come," she said. They guided the pair back by secret paths, Nymeria ranging between as guard and escort. At the Hunter's Gate, Arya left Gendry to fetch Maester Colrin and Sansa Dai. The tall creature, whom the girl named, cracked ice in her tongue, stooped to pass under the arch, then looked upon the castle towers with an expression impossible to read. Within the godswood, torches ringed the pool, their smoke clinging to budding branches. Sansa arrived robed in gray, hair braided tight. Colin clutched quills and parchment, eyes blazing curiosity. Arya introduced their guests with words she barely trusted. The translation stuttered again, but gist emerged. The others, White Walkers, shattered at the gorge, regrouped. Their commanders splintered into wills at odds. One, called Frost Mother, lay wounded beneath layers of glacial ice. Another, Ice Shear, stalked for a relic lost since the forging of the wall. That relic, Cracked Ice insisted, pulsed beneath Winterfell, deep in the hot springs that warmed the floors. An ember of red dawn, he said, capable of sealing or sundering ice-born hearts. Maester Colleran's quills scratched feverishly. Sansa frowned, folding arms. We were never taught such a relic exists. Cracked Ice's pale mouth opened in near smile. He placed a hand upon the heart tree's bark. Sap beaded at his palm, smoking. In that wisp of steam, Arya swore she saw fleeting shapes. Wolves, dire, then bodies frozen and blue shards splintering apart. Sansa inhaled. Is that proof? It is vision, said the girl. Stark blood must judge. Arya stepped forward. Her dreams the past fortnight had burned with rushes of hot water roaring through endless caverns. Sometimes faces glimmered in the torrent. She thought them mere echoes of plumbing repairs. But what if the hot springs served a purpose older than hospitality? They debated until first light. Conclusion: explore the tunnels. Cracked Ice would guide. Jon was days south. The burden fell to Arya again. Preparations were discreet. She chose 5 companions. Gendry, Maester Colleran for records, Sir Wylis Manderly's cautious sword, and the lantern-bearing steward Mathis, whose memory of passageways rivaled a rat's. Sansa remained topside. Someone must rule if caverns swallowed the rest. One afternoon, with Sansa sealing the castle above and Nymeria prowling impatient circles, they pried open an old grate in the great hall pantry floor and descended a corkscrew stair shrouded by centuries of dust. Warmth billowed upward, breath of the springs. Passages coiled like intestines, lit by damp-wick torches Gendry hammered from old spearheads. Echoes leapt corners ahead of them. The stone underfoot sweated. Mineral scent clung to eyelashes. Twice they crossed channels where spring waters sluiced through carved troughs, scalding enough to fog lamps. Cracked Ice walked barefoot, unflinching. After nearly 2 hours, Mathis halted, pointing at a keystone arch just tall enough for a man. Old runes marred it, wild scribbles rather than maester script. Arya brushed dust. Circles nestled inside triangles. She had seen the shape once, carved on driftwood that washed below the wall's shadow. 3 crowned daggers. The thought chilled her. Through the archway a chamber opened, spherical and vast. Steam hung thick, turning torchlight into columns of liquid gold. Pools bubbled at intervals. Between them, raised platforms of carved rock supported half-crumbled plinths. On each plinth sat an object, black-crusted and warped, as if forged in dragonfire then left in ice water. Cracked Ice approached the nearest. Gendry moved to block him, but Arya waved the smith aside. The creature touched the relic. Its crust fell away, revealing a translucent shard the color of molten sunrise. He turned, held it high. Light refracted through steam, flooding the chamber in red. Maester Colleran gasped. Bloodstone. It must be. Memory stone of the Dawn Age. His voice shook. From the tunnel behind them, Nymeria growled, ears back. A clatter echoed, then steel rang steel. Shadows spilled. Men in scaled leather, faces swathed, each bearing black banners stitched with 3 silver daggers crowned by rubies. The golden dagger triad had found them. Arya's dagger flew to hand. "Gendry," she barked, though he was already swinging his hammer. The chamber convulsed with noise. Steam swirled, torches guttered, iron clanged. Cracked Ice cradled the bloodstone and withdrew to the center platform. Arya met the first assailant. Lean, twin knives flicking. She ducked a slash, drove elbow to ribs, slashed calf sinew. He toppled into a spring, screaming as boiling water claimed him. Another came. Needle births, quick thrusts, But here she wielded the dagger. Its bite smashed through leather as if seeking bone. Gendry's hammer crashed skulls, each blow ringing like forge bells. Sir Willis parried a saber flurry, then head-butted his foe, dousing him beneath bubbling sulfur. But the triad pressed in waves. 3 fell, 4 replaced. Through scalding mist, Arya glimpsed a tall woman in crimson half-mask guiding the sellswards. Her eyes shone with unnatural lucidity. She chanted words that cracked like frost. Cracked ice answered with one bellow. The bloodstone erupted crimson, casting lines of light spidering across the chamber. They lanced into triad men, searing flesh where touched. Steam recoiled, rock vibrated. The masked woman shrieked, raising a blade of black glass. She leapt platform to platform, intent on cracked ice. Arya darted. She met the woman atop the central dais, Nymeria bounding up the stone behind. Twin blades clashed. Valyrian dagger? No, obsidian honed to unnatural resilience. Sparks spit. The woman hissed, striking low. Arya twisted, let the obsidian glance off her greave, then riposted, carving a slice across the woman's thigh. Blood dark as pitch welled. The woman staggered but laughed, a hiss more serpent than human. Too late, little wolf. The ember is ours. Nymeria lunged, jaws closing on the woman's sword arm. The obsidian blade clattered away. The woman's laughter cracked into shrieks as direwolf fangs met bone. Arya stepped forward and placed the point of her weirwood-gripped dagger under the woman's chin. Call them off, she said. But the woman only smiled through blood. The shadow comes. Then she jerked her head sideways, viper fast, and severed her own throat on Arya's blade. The body collapsed. Nymeria released, hackles bristling. Around them, triad mercenaries faltered, then fled in ragged retreat, leaving comrades dead or dying in scalding pools. Gendry limped to Arya, hammer dripping. Sir Willis supported Mathis. An arrow grazed the steward's shoulder but spared artery. Maester Colrin's parchment absorbed spring water where he knelt, scribbling madly even while blood trickled from his scalp. Cracked ice stepped forward, the bloodstone faint now. Shard chosen Stark, he croaked through translator to Berry and Root. Sue, he gurgled, lungs wheezing ash. The girl wiped his brow. In the heart tree, she said. He says it must rest where warm water meets red root, or ice winds will scent it again. Arya looked down at the shard glowing low. Memories of Lyanna's crypt, of father's voice, of Bran by the pond slid across her mind. She nodded. They made their way back, bodies bruised, pulse drumming. Sansa awaited at the pantry entrance, blue cloak pale as worry. When Arya emerged, steam ghosting off hair, eyes hollow from flashes of red light and boiling screams, her sister reached and steadied her elbow. What happened? Old truths woke, Arya said simply. But we put them to bed, under the tree. They proceeded to the Godswood. Torchlight followed, weaving through dark corridors, until the heart tree loomed. Arya knelt at the roots, still warm even after midnight chill, and pressed the bloodstone into the damp earth where bark met soil. Cracked ice chanted, leaves rustled though no wind blew. Sap welled, covered the shard, hardened like lacquer. A dull ruby glow seeped through once, twice, then went dark. Cracked ice exhaled, as if freed from decades-long pain. He collapsed to his knees, bond sealed. The translator whispered, tears tracking grime. We travel north again. Sansa blinked incredulous, but Arya touched her wrist. Let them. She turned to the travelers. Go with our thanks. Carry word to any still fighting the dead that Winterfell stands. At dawn they left by Hunter's Gate, figures swallowed by the forest. Snow had vanished to muddy memories. Birds sang fully now. In the weeks that followed, sickness struck a handful of garrison. Maester Colrin blamed tainted wellboards. Arya visited every cot, spooning willowbark tea, her small talk stiff but earnest. Gendry repaired Mathis' shoulder guard and forged replacement bolt heads. Sansa oversaw baths for every soldier returning from the caverns, scouring sulfur crusts from their boots. The Golden Dagger Triad did not attack again, though patrols found footprints circling the outermost fields, as if testing ward lines. When Arya examined one track herself, she noted the distance between strides, too long for ordinary men. The thought stalked her each night. Letters from Jon slowed. Roads turning to mire made ravens the fastest carriers. One message said he convinced House Tully's remnants to pledge a levy of 200 riverboats to bar the neck if Ice Whites breached the Sisters. Another told of Melisandre, Red Woman, arriving unbidden at his camp, speaking of veins of fire, awakening. Arya read these lines aloud to Sansa, who frowned at references to shadow and light. Yet neither sister doubted the omen. Had they not themselves buried a shard of sunrise beneath their own heart tree? Then came Bran. He rode into Winterfell one dusk, clothed in doveskin, flecked with lingering snowflakes, face unreadable behind the cowl. Two quiet men pushed his wicker cart. Perched on one spoke, a raven preened. Arya dropped the practice spear she'd been checking, boots splashing the puddles as she strode. Bran. She offered her arms but hesitated, mindful of the tangle of reins and furs. He raised a gloved hand instead, brushing her knuckles. His eyes, one blue as winter sky, the other brown, glistened. You buried it. His voice carried weightless certainty. Yes. Was that what you saw? He blinked slow, as though the question swirled through pools of future and past. Not saw. Remembered, ahead. He offered no more, but later. When Sansa joined, they gathered in the solar lit only by dusk, and Bran spoke longer. He described dream routes, reaching from the heart tree into caverns, encircling the shard, drinking its heat. He said the shard would bloom during the long night, rising like dawn beneath feet of ice, expanding the springs until steam rolled across Winterfell's walls and turned every inch of stone into living hearth. Fire lines, Gendry muttered, awed. Sansa pressed fingers to her lips. Will it kill us? It warms, Bran answered. But warmth costs wood. You must feed the boilers beneath with hope and blood. Only Arya understood perhaps the translation. Feed it with the willingness to protect, to bleed if necessary, yet to remain kind. After Bran's arrival, life rearranged. Small folk visited him for blessings. Ravens nested around his tower perch. He refused any title, yet his presence alone stilled quarrels. One mid-morning, a pair of quarreling shepherds were brought before Lady Stark. Bran wheeled in quietly behind. When Arya turned to ask advice, he simply murmured two names, likely cows stolen. And the shepherds went pale, confessed, reconciled before Arya uttered ruling. Sansa joked Bran should sit at every council. Arya watched her brother's far-seeing eyes and wondered if he sat at councils yet to be born. Summer neared. Barley sprouted dense and green. Wildflowers colonized trenches left by catapults, long unused. Under a bright sky, Arya sparred again. This time against Sir Wylis' nephew Corden, a nimble youth with cocky grin. They fought with tourney batons. Sweat stung Arya's eyes, but she pivoted on mud, cracked his guard, tapped his helm 3 times until he yielded breathless. Cheers erupted. The Yard's new recruits learned a lesson. No mercy from a Stark simply because she smiled before the bout. After, she sat with Gendry beneath the ramparts, sharing a skin of water. He poked her bruised forearm gently. You collect these badges, she said. She leaned shoulder into him. I have worse. Relic under the tree still burning? He asked softly. In dreams, Bran says it sings. I don't hear words, only drum beats. He studied her profile. You ever think of sails? Sails? There's a ship in White Harbor I could buy cheap, once the season opens. A wide-bottomed cog. We could fit a forge mid-deck and trade up the coast. Old Town, maybe even Dorne. She laughed, more from yearning than ridicule. And leave Winterfell to wolves who don't sing our song. Jon will come back. Sansa rules as well as any queen. Arya traced the dent in her baton with thumb. She imagined foam spray, gulls, distant horizons. But then she pictured wheat fields here. Stone walls glowing orange at sunset, silver wolves carved over gates, every inch branded by memory. She shook her head. "Not yet," she whispered. He kissed her temple, no further argument. Storms of late spring cracked thunder across the north. One night lightning struck the old watchtower atop the library ridge. Flame leapt but rain quenched. Arya organized a chain bucket line anyway, drenched to bone by the time charred rafters collapsed safely inward. Nymeria stood beside her in the downpour, muzzle parted to the sky, exhilarated. Arya shared it. Storms tasted like rebirth. Another raven arrived in mid-storm. Jon crossed the neck toward Moat Cailin, bringing southern allies, 1,200 men of Blackwood, Bracken, Hightower outriders led by Sam Tarly. They would quarter at Winterfell for a fortnight before marching again beyond the wall. Arya read the names aloud. Tarly, Blackwood, Southern blood treading her hall. She folded the parchment and issued orders for guest bedding. Doubled watch rotations. The evening before Jon's host was due, Arya stood alone in the great hall. Trestle tables gleamed, scrubbed with sand and lemon oil. New rushes perfumed the floor. Banners hung crisp. She traced Father's high seat, remembering the day he set Bran on his lap, announced the boys coming journey south. Circles of time completed themselves strangely. Departures and returns drawn like noose knots, where one strand always cut free at the last. She felt a touch. Gendry. He adjusted a bronze nail on the chair's arm, recently mended. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be," she answered. Jon rode in at first light. Lines of men behind like a river of mail and spears. Horns sounded, gate chains clanked. Arya and Sansa descended steps as he dismounted. His southern companions looked weary but eager. Sam Tarly broader than ever, face open with relief. Lady Bethany Blackwood sharp-eyed. Sir Hyle Hunt cracking jokes with Manderley lads already. Jon embraced his sisters, then held Arya back to examine healing bruise on her cheek from the baton spar. "Another war I missed. A small one in a hole," she said with grin. "We kept the North standing." He sobered. "I never doubted. Feasts ran for 3 nights. Winter ale, spring wine, musicians from White Harbor and Dreadfort both, unified under one roof." Jon spoke of hopes to rally the Vale next. Lady Sansa discussed textile trade with the Reach. Arya spent each daylight hour walking ramparts with visiting captains, mapping vantage lines should Whites reach inland. On the 4th day, Bran summoned her privately. In his tower, the air smelled of cedar oil and feather quills. Ravens pecked crumbs from a tray. He motioned to a chair, fingers pale against wood. "You will go beyond the wall," he said, no preface. Arya's breath stilled. Jon forbade it. He forbade the sister who wandered angry. Not the lady who guards shards of dawn. "Why me?" "Because the song changes." He closed eyes. Lashes looked frost-tipped under lantern light. North of ice, a child with eyes of summer waits. If she dies, the wall's root cracks. You can find her, because you carry no crown, no prophecy weight. Only promise. Gendry must come too. Hammer wakes hearts. Arya gripped the chair arms until knuckles blanched. Another quest. But the memory of steam chambers and triad blades cooled her quick fear. She had walked worse nights. How far? Farther than maps. I'll draw a trail. Ravens know the passes. He opened a scroll. Symbols spiraling. She studied it until signet shapes branded behind her eyelids. Then she rose, kissed Bran's brow, and went to find Gendry. He listened without flinch. "Beyond the wall," he repeated, thumb at the scar on his jaw. He then fetched a fresh hammerhead and held it to lamplight. "I'll name this one Hearthbreaker. Because it's coming back to Winterfell." They prepared in secret nights. Fur-lined mail, mountain ponies hardened to wind, a sled reinforced with brass runners, dried lingon berries, salt pork. Maester Colleran brewed sap salve for frostbite. Only Sansa and Jon were told. Jon's fury passed quick into heavy silence. At last he clasped Arya's shoulders. "Bring her out," he said of the nameless girl Bran foresaw. "Then fly south." "I will," Arya promised. The morning they left, snow fell again, though buds already sprouted on garden herbs. Nymeria bounded ahead through white hush. Gendry rode at her flank. Bran's raven circled overhead. Jon and Sansa watched from the gate. Bran sat unmoving in his chair on the wall walk, eyes cloud white, as if glimpsing their footprints scoring against the unwritten future. Arya Stark felt fear, yes, but deeper surged purpose refined by seasons of healing and fight. She touched Needle's hilt, felt the new dagger's warmth at her spine, and inhaled air sharp as the first cut of steel on whetstone. Winterfell shrank behind, yet she carried it within. The children's lessons, the boilers under stone, the shard of dawn sealed in root, the song of wolves singing over fields yet to ripen. Ahead lay ghost forests, tumbled watchtowers, the waste of frozen waves. Somewhere beyond waited a child whose life tipped the balance between dawn and endless dark. Arya urged her horse into the falling snow, and the pack moved as one. The gate closed, but its memory glowed bright in her chest. A hearth she would return to, a seat she would fill again, a north she would forever guard, not as a killer sharpening names, but as a keeper of fires that turned ice itself to living water. The world's breath hung vapor around them. Step by step, they vanished into white, carrying with them a story still unfolding, its slow bright thread spinning through the dark toward a dawn none could yet imagine, but which, because of a stubborn girl turned lady, now stood a chance of rising. Dawn day. Aishe. The wind at the head of the King's Road curled south that morning as though reluctant to let them pass, catching at the gray felt of Arya's hood and the fur lining of Gendry's cloak, and tugging at the black feathers streaking Ghostwing the Raven's shoulders where it rode a curl of air above Nymeria's loping stride. Behind them, Winterfell dwindled between folds of rolling snow-hummocked fields. Its towers smudged charcoal against the early light horizon, the banners of direwolf and torch already half lost to pale distance. Soon even the memory of warm stone would sink beneath rises of ground mist, and the first shallow drifts of late spring squalls. They carried the hush of farewell like extra weight in their saddlebags. Not a word had been spoken since passing the watch copse north of the barley fields, though the path underfoot was flooded with sounds. Creak of leather girths, clop of mountaineer ponies bred small and dense for glacier scrub. The faint hiss of wet flakes, finding old crusts of ice. Arya rode pony. No formal name, simply pony ever since she'd traded a guilty oath to Bran that she would not risk Sparrow on this ride. Gendry's gelding bristle marched with ears flattened against the wind. Nymeria, padding in and out of the trees, set a pace neither horse begrudged. She seemed to know the urgency better than any of them, ever watchful amber eyes flicking to ridgelines no man could scan and back again to footprints filling behind the little procession. 10 miles put the last shepherd buyers behind them. The land tipped downward toward the shivering water, the first real boundary between household men and the wild country Bran's raven script named Wolf's Rest. At a thaw-swollen ford, they paused, Gendry kneeling in slush, to cinch the sleds forward trace around a moss-slicked rock, where he could lever the runners across a bend of exposed shale. Steam rose from the river like dragon breath, reminding Arya of the subterranean caverns under Winterfell. Reminding her, too, that the heat of those waters came from a root of something older than any wall or oath. She dismounted and let pony drink. Icy water beaded on the mare's whiskers. When Nymeria's reflection joined them, wolf muzzle almost level with her own bowed face, Arya found herself whispering half a prayer, though no proper god was named. Only bring us safe, bring the child safe, bring the dawn. They pressed on. Mid-sun, Ghostwing settled to Arya's saddle front, claws gentle as an apology. The raven croaked once, a sound that seemed to twist with strange age before dropping to its everyday caw. Arya slid 2 kernels of soaked wheat from a wax wrap, and the bird gulped them, head bobbing. It stared east then, ruff bristling, as if reading script on the heavy sky. Behind them the road had disappeared into a pale blur. Ahead, beyond line after line of ragged pine, the splintered teeth of the last foothills broke black through snow. By dusk, they reached the fastness Bran called the Old Sentry, a ring of boulders whose outer faces were striated basalt and whose inward sides smooth as if river-worn. No one living recalled a sentry post there. The name survived because hunters said the stones stood like soldiers watching the valley. They unpacked beneath the flattest slab, unrolled waxcloth over partially thawed earth, and set a wedge-shaped shelter in the lee of rock. Arya tended the ponies while Gendry coaxed flame out of shavings and pitchcloth. Nymeria circled the outer rim, snuffling, tail low, then settled by the sled to gnaw jerky. Only when stew hissed, a thin brew of pork lard, dried carrot slivers, and barley ground to dust, did Arya speak. Bran called her eyes of summer, she said quietly, gazing into the dark where the land fell off toward the river. Gendry stirred the pot once, twice, letting each motion answer before he gave voice. Summer eyes could mean green like new leaves, he offered, or gold like harvest. He tasted, grimaced at the salt, added a pinch more snow to sweeten the brine. Then more softly, or it could mean naive. Arya's shrug belonged to a girl half her years and miles younger, but she felt that old shrug deep in the sinew behind her ribs. Children should be naive, she said. I was once. It didn't last. But I remember what it felt like. Maybe that's why Bran sent me. To keep that for her, Gendry murmured. And because you know what it can cost to lose it. The stew finished without further talk. They ate leaning shoulder to shoulder, tin bowls warming palms numbed by wind. Nymeria's breath ghosted Arya's elbow. The wolf accepted a ladle of broth without protest, licked the metal long after it cooled, then laid her chin on folded paws. Gendry doused the flame with a lid of packed snow. The hush surrounding them deepened, until Arya could hear the brush of falling crystals on canvas. The steady heart clang of her own pulse in the side of her throat. Night pressed in, scented with resin and the faint metallic tang of far ice. Arya lay inside the doubled furs, hands tucked beneath neck, and listened to Gendry's breathing even out until it matched the slow, subterranean beat of the earth. Sleep blurred around her eyes, but she forced them open once more, mind walking back into Winterfell's godswood to check the buried shard as though it were a child left alone in the dark. In her imagination, the red light glowed strong beneath roots moist with spring water. She saw the pulse echo outward through soil, through stone, into the bones of every tower. Only then did she surrender to dreams that were, for that night at least, mercifully ordinary. They awoke to find the world remade in white silence. Snowflakes had stacked heavy through the second watch, smoothing the old sentry stones into lumps topped with thick skullcaps. The shelter's guy lines bowed, but canvas held. Gendry emerged first, boots crunching, and whistled low. Up, he called softly. Easier to break trail when the powder's loose. Arya joined him at the sled, beat her gloves against her thighs. Half-packed drifts swallowed the runners. They shoveled with cooking lids until the iron rims surfaced. Nymeria shook white from her shoulders and bounded past, carving a dog-shaped tunnel in the knee-deep powder. It would slow them, but not disastrously. Bran's raven notes warned of squalls subtler than full blizzards, patchy sheets that fell then left blue sky within hours. As though on cue, by mid-morning the clouds tore open, revealing a sun too bright for comfort. They donned bone-rimmed snow goggles Gendry had sanded smooth back in Mikken's nephew's shop. Arya found the distorted oval slits unsettling. They felt like wearing masks again, but she endured staring ahead at trackless white. She set pace behind Nymeria, who bore no goggles but sighted by scent, cresting drift ridges without pause. Ghostwing flew low, wings tipping to catch updrafts. The map Bran inked served more like memory than directions. A swirl of lines marking features no maester had catalogued. Burned stump grove, ridge that hummed in storms, rivers flowing uphill when moon rose. Yet each signpost proved out. By the second noon, they crested the humming ridge and felt a low tremor through soles and fetlocks, a vibration akin to giant bees inside the granite. Gendry crouched and pressed an ear. It sings. Stone remembers dawn, Arya said. She quoted cracked ice without conscious choice, and for an instant she was back in the steam chamber with red light lancing through mist. Triad men screaming. She shut the memory down. Toward dusk, timberline broke. Beyond lay the first gate of the old-growth forest called Wolf's Rest. Oak and pine bred huge on centuries of undisturbed soil. The path narrowed to a twisty channel, where overhanging branches formed tunnels of dripping needles. Snow thinned under the canopy, replaced by patches of black earth, already fluffed with the first scallops of moss. It smelled of mulch and hidden life. Arya drank it in. At an hour, Bran's raven map named Last Violet. They discovered the antler arch. Twin elk skulls, ancient beyond bleaching, faced outward from a lichen-crusted lintel made of braided trunks. Blue fungus coated the antler tips. Icicles hung like glass tears from empty eyeholes. Nymeria halted and sniffed, fur rising. Gendry drew Hearthbreaker half an inch. Arya slipped off pony, left reins to dangle, and advanced. 3 slow steps brought her under the arch. She laid a palm on the curved bone. Warmth pulsed faint as a heartbeat. Then from shadows in the trees ahead, a single snowshoe hare bounded into view, paused, ears pricked, and stared with green eyes luminous even in slack light. Arya froze. No hare should bear such eyes. They gleamed bright as emerald glass, almost human in their concentration. The animal turned and fled deeper between the trunks. Nymeria gave chase 3 paces before Arya's whistle pinned her. She returned, tail lashing, hackles unsure whether to lift or lie. Only silence remained beyond the arch. Arya let her hand drop. "She saw us," she murmured. Gendry sheathed the hammer. That a sign? She could be the sign. They debated short while, whether to camp at the arch or pursue. In the end, necessity decided. The sled's runners jarred against roots and ridges among the ancient trees, forcing them to halt. They built lean shelter once more, this time within the hollow of a fallen ironwood trunk, split neatly to ground. Flame refused to catch in the damp, so they ate cold pork slices wrapped around hard cheese and bedded early. In dreams, Arya ran not with Nymeria, but behind the green-eyed hare, lunging through brambles that opened like polite doors. Each leap brought her closer, yet impossible distance remained. Suddenly the hare turned human. A girl no more than 10, dark of hair. Eyes green gold, winter-stained shift clinging to skinny frame. She smiled and spoke Bran's name, nothing more. Arya woke with jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. Snow ceased overnight. Morning sun found them striking camp and forging forward along a game track Nymeria claimed as the Har's route. After 3 miles, the track split around a cluster of granite tors seamed by crevices, breathing faint steam. On the eastmost tor something had carved a spiral of fist-sized stones. Each stone punched through its center like a giant had drilled it. Gendry spied it first. "Looks like a watch eye," he muttered, forging hand gliding across the nearest stone's cool surface. Arya studied the spiral. Within its coils, snowy filaments blew gentle, as spider silk, though no wind cut between the tors. She reached to touch one. It dissolved into droplets that stained her glove green. Sap. Blood. A smell rose, sharp as crushed pine but sweeter too, like garden mint. Nymeria whimpered behind her. "Let's go," Arya said. Beyond the tors, forest floor sloped to a hollow where the snowdrift ended in a bright pool ringed by crushed grass. Steam plumed off glass-still water. They tethered the ponies at a safe remove. Even snow-drunk horses will paw at an inviting thaw and tumble in. Arya approached the bank, scanning for prints. None. Yet the water's edge showed indentations like bowls where knees or small feet might have pressed. She crouched, touched fingers to the surface. Warm, almost bath-hot. Runnels fed outward, carving channels where ice crystals ticked like brittle chimes. With no further sign, they turned north again. A corridor Bran's map dubbed the Raven's Ladder. Tree limbs interlocked overhead, dropping needles that whispered memory of far-off storms. By midday, shadows shortened until bole and branch carved moving runes across their cloaks. Gendry pointed to a fallen trunk spanned like a bridge. Atop lay 3 hares, white coats mottled by early molt. Their throats were slit neat. Beside them rested a circle of rowan berries crushed to pulp. Ravens had not touched the carcasses. Meaning lingered like scent. Arya felt her stomach tighten. "They were left for us," she said. "Or for her," Gendry replied. They buried the hares under snow, a gesture of what dignity they could spare. Nymeria licked the air, then shook herself. unsettled. Toward last light, they reached the base of a bluff ridged with frost-heave ledges. Exactly where Bran's incline ended. Beyond lay the uncharted. Ghostwing wheeled above, croaking once. Arya cupped chilled hands around her mouth and whistled. 2 rising notes, a call older than her days, with the faceless and from far before her father's voice. Echo answered from the rock face, but on its dying lilt came a second tone. Thin, reedy, unmistakably human, mimicking her whistle but sliding into minor cadence on the tail. She drew the weirwood dagger. Gendry readied hammer and small shield. They advanced. A snow cornice broke under Nymeria's foot, triggering a miniature fall that hissed down the slope. When white dusk cleared, they saw an opening half hidden by dead ivy. A mouth. Above it, icicle fangs dripped. Tracks lay faint beneath, child-sized, bare. Arya's heart bumped once hard. "Lantern," she whispered. Gendry produced the hooded lamp, coaxed the wick alive with a low puff. Gold light spilled into the cave. The passage wound narrow. Steam ghosted near the floor. Another hot spring vein. A faint hum accompanied the drip of water, reminiscent of the humming stones miles south. Nymeria squeezed behind Arya, tail brushing her thigh. Ghostwing hopped from lantern handle to Gendry's shoulder, blinking in the gloom. The tunnel elbowed right, dipped, opened into a chamber no bigger than Winterfell's library scriptorium. In its center sat a girl. She wore a pelt pieced of rabbit skins, hair matted, cheeks hollow but eyes alive, luminous green with shards of gold that caught the lantern. On her lap lay a carved birch pipe. Its mouthpiece rested against cracked lips, though no breath issued. Her gaze fixed on Arya, unblinking. Arya knelt slowly, dagger reversed to show the hilt. "I'm Arya," she said, voice a thread. She swallowed, tried again. "My name is Arya Stark. I came from Winterfell." The girl cocked her head. A gesture almost avian, yet shy rather than menacing. Then she lifted the pipe and sounded a single note. Low, vibrating, nearly the pitch of wind through marsh reeds. Nymeria whimpered but held. Gendry crouched beside Arya. "Bran said she has no clan language," he murmured. "Music is her tongue." "Music and beasts," Arya answered. She reached into her cloak pocket and drew out a small strip of jerky, placed it on the earth between them. The girl's eyes flicked down, then back. Again she sounded the pipe, this time 2 notes. Ascending, questioning. Arya mirrored with her own whistle, 2 notes, matching rise. Silence. The girl's lips parted in what might have been a smile. She inched forward, seized the jerky and retreated, devouring it in 2 bites. Arya exhaled. "Easy," she whispered. She pulled back her hood, letting tangled brown hair fall free. The girl studied her, expression unreadable. When Arya extended her hand, palm up, the child tilted forward on hands and knees, sniffed fingertips like a wary fawn. Then, sudden as a trembling leaf, she pressed her own palm to Arya's. Her skin was hot, feverish. "Gendry." Arya's voice broke. "She's burning." They made camp right in that chamber, beating the lantern to coax warmth. Gendry located the spring fissure, widened its lip with hammer edge until water pooled into a cupped basin of rock. It steamed, but did not boil. He added snow until steam stilled, then plunged a cloth to soak. Arya wrung the compress and laid it across the child's brow. The girl flinched only once. Her eyes half closed, lashes black against sallow skin. Nymeria curled on the other side, body a living barrier. Ghostwing settled above, feathers ruffled, head bowed as though standing vigil. The hum from deeper in the earth thrummed louder, or perhaps their ears attuned in stillness. Long hours later, the fever broke. Beads of sweat ringed the girl's temples. She stirred, whispered hoarse syllables. No tongue Arya recognized. She answered with soft nonsense, old lullaby fragments from mother to Bran. Nonsense meant to soothe. Gendry dozed upright, hand on hammer. When full dark swallowed the forest outside, Arya felt the girl grip her wrist. The lantern sputtered. In its dying glow, Arya watched those summer eyes focus on her. The child spoke one word, clear in common. Root, Tau. Then her hand slackened. She slept. Morning found them weary but determined. They coaxed the child, now draped in Arya's second cloak, toward the cave mouth. At first, she resisted, knees buckling at each patch of light, but Nymeria's gentle nudge from behind eased her forward. Outside, icy sun haloed black trunks. Ghostwing launched to circle. Gendry fastened sled harness to his belt, pulling alongside the ponies. They swaddled the child in pelts and set her upon stacked packs. She watched their every motion, fascination outpacing fear. When Arya climbed to pony's saddle, the girl mimicked, as though remembering the posture from another life. They turned south. Travel back through the forest seemed shorter, paths unwinding, as if ground itself wished their departure. Where the hares had lain, nothing remained but berry stains faded to pink. The spiral stones still hummed, but their center was flooded by meltwater, through which small green sprouts lifted, impossibly early. The ants of worry crawling Arya's spine began to quiet. The child spoke rarely, but each time the word was root. At meal halts, she tapped fist to earth in emphasis. Maester Corran's travel kit contained no lore for that, but Arya guessed Bran must interpret. Twice the child pointed to Nymeria with a soft shuffling note. Friendly recognition of pack. At the arch of the elk skulls, dusk caught them. Snowmelt dripped from antler points. Here the wind changed, warmer, smelling of far springs, and Arya knew Winterfell's boilers were blooming beneath the stones. On the third day, ridge peaks cleared. They saw the pale plume of the castle's chimney forest against horizon blush. A bell rang faintly across leagues, carried by luck or fate. Arya tasted tears she did not recall summoning. They arrived in torchlit evening. Gate guards cheered. Someone shouted for Maester Corran. Bran's ravens swooped overhead in black carnival. Jon and Sansa descended the steps almost as one breath. Sansa embraced Arya hard, then knelt before the sled, taking the child's face in gloved hands. Green eyes met blue. Jon laid a palm atop the little skull gently, murmured words lost in noise. Inside the great hall, heat fanned from braziers so full that sparks flurried like orange snowflakes up the rafters. The child shrank from brightness until Bran wheeled forward. He raised one hand. The entire hall stilled, as though his fingers pinched every note of hubbub. "Welcome," he said, voice lilting with thousand-mile echoes. The child stiffened. Then she raised her pipe and played one low note in answer. Bran smiled, sadness lining it. "She remembers," he whispered. "Bring her to the root." They processed to the godswood. Torches rimmed the pool, reflecting twin flames on mirror surface. The shard beneath earth glimmered faint through snowfall that had crusted earlier marble smooth over the clearing. Bran guided, Jon at his chair handle, Gendry and Arya flanking. The crowd held back. The child walked unaided once inside the ring. She approached the heart tree. Sap pulsed red where bark had split in living veins. She pressed both palms to wood, closed her eyes and began to hum. The same note she played in the cave, but grown. A third above, a fifth, a minor fall, layer on layer until sound filled marrow and stone. Arya felt tears warm on cheeks. Nymeria's head tipped, muzzle parting in soft keen. The tree answered. Sap welled thick. Snow atop roots melted in runnels. Steam, a gentler twin to the cavern springs, rose and whirled around them. Through that veil, Arya glimpsed shapes. Wolves racing, children laughing by a pond, mother's voice singing of the maiden fair. Fleeting but real. When it cleared, the shard's glow underfoot brightened, ruby heart beating once, twice, then settling. Branches above stilled. The child sagged. Jon caught her before knees buckled. She looked up at him, then at Arya, and smiled sleepy trust. That night, no feast roared. Only quiet gratitude pooled through corridors. Arya sat at Bran's side while he inked new lines on a fresh map, marking the route now singing with two voices. He spoke soft. The shadow forks again, but light has grown teeth. And the girl is bridge, blood of the forest and breath of men. What of the dead? Arya asked. They will come still, Bran answered. But when the shard's dawn rises fully, Winterfell will shine like torch for leagues. Let them come. They'll meet day where they expect night. Bemsri. Arya left him writing and sought the yard. Gendry strode from the forge, hair damp, face sweat-streaked. He saw her, grinned, wiped hands. She ran the distance between them and embraced until breath seemed singular. He whispered, "Roots deep now. You still dream of oceans." "One day," she said. "Not yet." They parted only when Nymeria shoved between, chuffing indignation. The wolf's golden eyes mirrored the forge light. She licked Arya's knuckles, then trotted to the main gate as if reminding them watch duty never sleeps. In months following, the child, named Lyora by Sansa, after the ancient word for dawn music, grew strong. She learned speech in quick bursts, though still preferred whistle and pipe. She followed Arya often, shadow quiet, observing spear drills or ledger readings. When new builders arrived from the Neck, she surprised everyone by guiding them to clay deposits perfect for kiln brick. She always found roots. It became a jest among small folk that she could smell sap beneath stone. Scouts brought news of white pockets collapsing unexpectedly into sinkholes that steamed. Jon believed the root's heat vented miles outward, thinning the dead where currents rose. The Golden Dagger, Triad attempted one more raid on grain convoys. This time, Northmen routed them with minimal loss, and no one again sighted the crowned dagger banners. Summer readied its first festival. Wildflowers carpeted the hills. Fields of barley, once feared barren, stood knee-high, shining pale green under sun. Arya rode boundaries daily with Lyora perched before her on Pony's saddle, the girl laughing when Nymeria splashed through creeks and scattering swallows into the sky. One evening, at that hour between true dusk and lamplight, Arya climbed the tallest tower. Winds smelled of distant rain. She looked north, where faintest glimmer of aurora teased above the plain. Not menace now, but sentinel. Behind her Gendry arrived, carrying 2 cups of sweetened small beer. He offered one. They clinked. 5 hours once felt endless, she mused after a sip. And now it feels like the first chapter of something longer. She rested elbows on stone. Stories don't end just because the dark grows teeth and the light learns to bite back. They flow. He nodded, watching the horizon with her. Then we keep walking. She found his hand, fingers rough, beloved. Yes, step after step, root to root. Below them Winterfell pulsed. Forge hammers, children's laughter, hooves clop on stone. Beyond the walls, barley whispered. In the god's wood the heart tree glowed red at its core, shard of dawn banking to greater blaze with each heartbeat of the land. Arya breathed deep, tasting ash of bygone fires, sweetness of new grass, salt of tears shed and unshed. She closed her eyes. Inside that darkness unfolded memory, promise, wolf song, flame, dot. She felt the world spin beneath her feet and knew she stood steady. And somewhere beyond the farthest line of snow, the shadow fork still crawled. But it crawled toward fire it could never fully quench, for the pack had kindled a light in the very bones of winter. And the lady who was once a wandering blade guarded it with every lesson carved into steel and soul, every scar earned and grace claimed, every story still to be told under skies that would someday, no night too long for dawn to break. Go, Gai, Wai. Mist gathered at the crook of dawn, swirling above the dew-silvered barley, until the air itself seemed woven from old dreams and fresher hope. Arya stood at the base of the heart tree before the first bell, the bark cold and slick beneath her bare palm, her breath rising in plumes as pink as the horizon's edge. She listened for the subtle thrum she'd come to sense beneath the roots, a living echo of the bloodstone shard, a pulse only she, Bran, and Lyora could feel. The tree's sap bled red as always, but the roots were deeper now. Heat from the old springs melded with memory, pushing back the chill, lending the god's wood an uncanny warmth even on mornings such as this, when a fog so thick it felt like sleep still blanketed the world. She knelt, closed her eyes, and tried to recall every sound from the journey north. Gendry's quiet laugh at the edge of exhaustion, Nymeria's breathing under the stars, Lyora's pipe notes weaving through a frost-cold cave. She thought too of the girl's first words after the fever broke, the way she'd touched the heart tree's gnarled roots as if in benediction, as if planting something invisible that would flower even after their time. These moments layered themselves into Arya's bones, stronger than steel, quieter than prayer. When she rose, she felt the roots under her boots, the memory of every journey, every return. The barley was knee-high already, thick with promise. As she crossed the yard, women and boys hurried to chores, calling greetings or bowing heads. Lyora darted through the puddled lane, wolfskin cloak trailing, a wooden pipe in hand, and a band of smaller children trailing her. They wove among the sheep pens and vanished into morning light. The children had taken to her like another pup. Lyora, for her part, taught them the runes of the first men in lines of mud, showed them where wild roots grew sweetest. And once, when a sick lamb struggled to stand, laid her palm on its back and hummed until the lamb wobbled up and drank. Some said it was magic. Arya called it kindness, an inheritance of 1,000 years beneath the trees. Sansa met Arya by the granary, letters from the south pressed between her fingers. Joan's company crossed Maidenpool 3 days ago, she said, voice taut with relief. They sent word ahead. 20 boats hired for the last passage. Sam writes the Riverlands are healing. Arya nodded, watching a wagon trundle by laden with salted fish from the White Knife. And the south? Sansa pursed her lips. Sam's cousin claims the Golden Company has retreated to the Narrow Sea, at least for now, and Aegon has vanished. I expect ravens to lie until autumn. Let them lie, Arya said. We have roots here. They walked together into the keep. It had been nearly a year since Joan's last true visit, and the walls bore proof of quiet rebirth. The new watchtower stood, finished above the smithy, fresh banners flying at each corner. There was laughter in the stables, music in the great hall, old airs, new hands. On the training green, 2 of the guards sparred while a dozen children watched, Lyora at their side, pointing and laughing, as the smaller of the 2 fainted and spun. Her laugh trilled pure and high. Arya caught Gendry's eye by the forge and saw him grinning at the sound. Lyora's pipe had become her voice in all things. She whistled warnings to geese raiders, played slow laments in the godswood that made even the oldest Septon stop and bow his head. And sometimes, when Arya was alone, wove a melody so close to the stark lullabies that she'd weep and not feel shamed for it. In return, Arya taught her the small things. How to braid her hair so it would not snag on brambles, how to keep a knife sharp but not menacing, how to say thank you, sorry, and enough in half a dozen tongues. Sansa, in her turn, taught her to write the girl's name on parchment. Lyora, always with a curl for the L, sometimes with a leaf drawn after, became a sigil for healing, the start of a new page. There were threats, still, shadowborn and living. Twice that spring scouts found footprints beyond the barley, prints too long for any man. Once, a crow returned from the wall with feathers scorched and the mark of frostbite on its legs, message gone. Joan's warning was simple. There is always a shadow. Hold the light. Arya trained the youngest with bow and spear, not out of fear but readiness. Gendry's forges never cooled. Every able smith in the north learned to layer steel with a sliver of weirwood and a sliver of dawnglass, just in case. Each was given to a name and a place, catalogued by Lyora, in a ledger she kept with diligent pride. The day of Joan's return arrived without fanfare. A herald from the port reported boats sighted. By noon, dust rose along the King's Road, banners streaming blue and white and green. Arya stood at the top of the stairs beside Sansa, her hand tight on Lyora's shoulder, Gendry and Bran at her side, Nymeria lying sphinx-like at the gate. The column was smaller than legend would have it. Some 200 riders, half a dozen wagons, Samwell Tarly's broad shoulders bobbing atop a nervous horse, Jon riding lead, hair caught with snow and eyes shining as he beheld his home. He dismounted and embraced Arya first, then Sansa, then Bran, who smiled thin as a shadow but fierce. Lyora stood still until Jon crouched and beckoned. Then she ran to him, arms flung wide. He scooped her up, laughter breaking like sun. So you're the girl who found the root. I am, she said with perfect clarity, voice ringing in the hush that followed. Jon set her down, gaze sweeping the faces crowding the yard. "I've been to the far edge of the world and back," he said quietly. "I carried fire with me, but it was always your fires here that pulled me home." That night, Winterfell feasted. The kitchens smoked with stews and roasts, fresh bread piled in baskets, wine and small beer flowing. The minstrels played, but it was Lyora's pipe that silenced the hall. A song neither north nor south, but something old, half wild, half child. Sansa wept openly. Gendry stared as if he saw her renew each note. When quiet fell, Jon stood and lifted his cup. "To the root that runs beneath us," he said. "To the dawn we carry, to the light that endures." Cups clashed, hands clapped, laughter roared. Later, Arya and Gendry slipped away to the Godswood. They found Lyora there, curled in the crook of the heart tree, Nymeria lying close. Arya sat beside her, Gendry's arm around her shoulders, and watched the stars filter down through new-grown leaves. "You found her," Gendry whispered, voice thick. Arya leaned her head against his. "We found each other." For days after, the yard buzzed with news. Jon's men traded southern trinkets for northern steel. Bran taught children to spot the difference between a raven and a crow. Sansa negotiated new grain routes with Tarly's allies. Through it all, Arya watched Lyora, the girl who had grown root, who laughed with every sparrow, who whistled at dusk and drew men from their fears. One morning, as Arya walked the battlements alone, she saw Sansa below, speaking softly with a red-haired woman in rough linens. Sam's wife, she realized. The women laughed, children skipping around their skirts. Arya felt her chest tighten, not with sadness, but with a gladness almost too sharp to hold. The north was healing. Bran summoned her the next evening. The air in his solar was sweet with lavender, books scattered on every surface, candles guttering low. He rolled a new map onto the table, lines freshly inked. "The dead still stir," he warned. "But the root holds. I see Southrons coming, old friends, old enemies. They will test you, as shadows always do." Arya studied the map. "I will not let Winterfell fall." He smiled, old and young at once. "You never could. The girl, the root, anchors more than this castle. She anchors the hope of every house, every child who thinks light can outlast night. Remember that when the banners shift." Then, spring waxed green, summer riding its heels. Barley fields thickened. Wolves ran the edge of woods. Laughter spilled from every window. Arya kept her watch, Lyora at her side. When small folk sought her, she gave honest counsel. When the lords argued, she cut through with sense. She trained children in spear, but taught them too, how to tell wild mint from deadly nightshade, how to track a stag without driving it into panic. Her name traveled on the wind, as a protector, not a killer. It fit. Some nights, Lyora climbed the ramparts and played for the dusk. High sweet notes that carried as far as the moat, drawing foxes from dens, birds from roosts. Arya stood in shadow, Gendry's arm around her waist, and felt the old grief ebb. She watched Sansa preside over council with even hand, Bran dreaming the world's dreams, Jon walking the walls with a smile not seen since boyhood. But threats still gathered beyond the world's edge. Rumors drifted south, a warlord raising whites in the Shadowlands, dragon ships seen again off Skagos, the Golden Company rallying to a new pretender. Arya did not flinch. She dispatched ravens, called the bannermen, set drills for every spear. At her side, Lyora marked each name, whistling low for friend, high for threat, learning the balance between mercy and strength. One gray dawn, as Arya walked the wall with Bran, a shadow rose on the horizon. It was a single rider, pale cloak flapping, sword at his back, horse lathered. They watched him approach in silence. At the gate, Arya met him, Gendry at her side, Nymeria looming behind. The rider bowed, held up a scroll marked with a blood-red seal. "For the Lady of Winterfell," he gasped, "from the east." Arya broke the seal and read. The words were few, but enough. "A storm rises beyond the sea. Shadows wake. The old root is not the only one. Come if you can." She folded the parchment and looked at Gendry. "Another road," she said. He took her hand. "We ride together." She glanced back. saw Lyora and Sansa waiting by the heart tree, Bran's raven circling overhead. The roots ran deep, deeper than she had ever dreamed. She was ready. Before they left, Arya returned to the Godswood, knelt by the roots, and whispered a promise into the earth. "I will come back. I will always return." She felt the thrum answer her. The sun rose golden through the branches, casting their shadows long and bright across the stones. She stood, buckled needle and her weirwood dagger at her belt, took Gendry's hand, and walked through the gate. Lyora waved, pipe raised in farewell, and Sansa smiled through tears that caught the morning light. The world lay before them, wild and perilous, as always, but also beautiful, humming with new songs, bright with the fire of roots that would outlast winter, outlast night, outlast even the long shadows that forever threatened at the world's edge. And so Arya Stark rode into the dawn, not as a killer, not as a ghost, but as the Lady of Winterfell, keeper of the root, bearer of hope, and the first song of spring. Dajta and Karen. Smoke curled from the new forges in Winterfell's yard as Arya and Gendry rode out beneath the arch of the east gate. Lyora perched on pony before them, her feet barely brushing the battered stirrup. The day began draped in gauze mist that caught sun in whorls of gold and shadow, but the sky soon brightened into a wide spring blue, cloudless save for the faint silver whorls of distant ravens tracking the Barrowlands. Arya did not look back. She knew the yard behind was full of waving hands, the ramparts crowded with faces, Sansa with tears bright in her smile, Bran's raven circling above his unmoving form on the battlement, Jon's tall silhouette among the guard, sword hilt bare at his back, but his hand empty, fingers bent as if grasping a memory. The rider from the east had not come alone in his message, nor in his wake. 3 nights before, a half-frozen wildling had reached the gates, mouth torn by fever, bearing a shard of obsidian thrust through the leather thong at her neck. She lived long enough to whisper, "Ravens fly backward, sun is eating its own tail, there are more than roots beneath the ground." Then she died, and the blood from her nose turned black as coal. Maester Corran wrote it down, burned the parchment, and said nothing more. Jon said only, "Go, the east is not safe, but you've never chosen safe." Gendry brought 2 axes, Hearthbreaker slung with the new bladed hammer, and wore mail beneath his fur. Arya dressed as for the woods, soft leather, wolfskin, boots that made no sound on cobblestone or leaf mold. Lyora carried her pipe, and wore the hair-braided tokens the children of Winterfell had given her. A copper ring, a crow's feather, a twist of barley. They rode northeast, following the old river road through green valleys dimpled with wildflowers, their path watched by the first of the season's stags, and the skittish dark shapes of foxes. At night, fires burned low. Lyora played softly, and the wolves who ranged beyond the edge of the circle whined but did not come near. Gendry slept at Arya's back, boots crossed, one hand never far from his hammer. Arya watched the stars and thought of the root pulsing under Winterfell's Godswood. The faint red heart she could almost feel beneath the soles of her feet, even this far from home. They passed Last Hearth, rebuilt but wary, and found hospitality with the Umbers. The old lord, too sick to rise, sent a cloak of spun sheep's wool for Lyora, for the child who brings song to the silent places. She accepted it shyly, eyes wide, fingers tracing the blue dye. In return, Arya left 2 weirwood-tipped arrows and a promise. "If the shadows come, burn the western wall first." The Umber guards shivered at that, but nodded. News moved faster than wind. They all knew of the wildling's warning. North of the Dreadfort, the land grew strange, as though the horizon slouched. Mists hung longer. And one dusk, at the edge of the shivering forest, they found a herd of reindeer frozen in their tracks, not felled by arrow or tooth, but locked in place, eyes wide, as if surprised by the memory of summer. Lyora wept at the sight and played a dirge that cracked the dusk with heartbreak. Arya buried a handful of moss in the snow beside them and whispered the names of the old gods. Gendry left an offering of iron, 3 nails twisted into a spiral. On the 12th day, they met their first shadow. It moved on two legs, but its feet left no imprint, and it carried a spear of fused ice and old bone. Nymeria met it with a low hunting growl that set the hairs on Arya's neck bristling. The shadow spoke in a voice too deep, each word as if dragged from stone. Turn back. The east has no room for roots. Monagand. Arya held her ground. The east has need of them. If the sun eats its tail, it is because it wants to see what's inside. The shadow stilled. Lyora played 3 notes, as clear as water over slate. The shadow's spear bent, an impossible arc, like a branch thawing, and it sank into the snow and vanished, the spear lingering, then melting to nothing. The wind afterward tasted faintly of salt and ash. They did not sleep well that night. Arya dreamed of rivers running backward, and of Lyora standing atop a tower with a heart tree growing from her hands. Leaves like flames, birds like shards of obsidian whirling above. The land east of the weeping water was riven by streams too warm for the season, a wrongness in the flow. Trees grew gnarled and stunted, and the birds, when they appeared, sang only at noon, then fell silent as if each dusk were a threat. They found a village burned, the people gone but for footprints that circled and circled the square, then vanished as if lifted by wind. On the 13th dawn, Gendry woke Arya with a hand on her shoulder. Smoke, west slope. She rolled to her feet, knives drawn. They crept forward, Nymeria silent ahead, Lyora behind, her pipe held ready. At the crest, they saw a fire ringed by wildlings in tattered black, a woman at its heart, her hair long and gold, skin stained red with ochre. She looked up and saw them at once, raising a palm. "I am the last singer of Skagos," she said, her voice echoing. "I waited for the root to come east. You bring her." She pointed to Lyora. Arya asked, "Do you know what hunts here?" The singer nodded. "Shadows from beyond the bones, where the first dawn failed. There are 3, one for each branch. One seeks to freeze the rivers, one to turn the sky to stone, one to steal the children who can call dawn." Lyora stepped forward and played a rising, trembling note. The singer bowed. "She knows what must be done," she said. "The roots must be joined." "How?" Arya asked. The woman rose, wrapping herself in sealskin, and beckoned them deeper into the forest. "You must find the river's end. Where water vanishes, the sun's tail coils, and the root beneath the root can grow." Nandandaro. They traveled 3 days, the wildling singer at their side. She called birds to her hand, whispered to the trees, and when the shadowy shapes reappeared at dusk, she sang to them in a voice so full of old sorrow that even the ice in their hands cracked and fell away. Gendry watched her warily. Arya watched Lyora, who never seemed afraid, only focused, eyes always on the horizon. On the 16th night, they found the river's end, a waterfall spilling into a chasm of mist so thick it seemed to breathe. The singer pointed. Below, the heart of the east. They camped on the rim, then at dawn descended. Arya led, Gendry after, Lyora on her back, the wildling woman last. The path spiraled, the air thick with vapor, and the cry of unseen birds. Far below, water struck rock and vanished into a black pool that glowed, faintly, with a light like the bloodstone under Winterfell, only colder blue shot with white. On the shore, Lyora slipped from Arya's back and walked barefoot to the edge. She played her pipe, and the pool answered. A hum like the first chord of dawn, a sound that split the mist and called the sun down the chasm's throat. Shadows stirred at the edge. Arya and Gendry closed around her, weapons drawn. The wildling woman began to sing. Root to root, blood to blood, sun in water, dawn in mud, rise now, rise and be undone. From the pool, something rose, a shadow wrapped in bone, its face the memory of a winter wind. It reached for Lyora. Arya stepped forward, blade in hand, but Lyora only played a single high note, pure and defiant. The shadow's hand stopped. Gendry struck his hammer on the rock, and the note echoed. Light blazed from the pool, red and blue, mingling into gold. The shadow screamed, dissolved, and the mist peeled back. In the pool, the bloodstone pulsed. Lyora knelt and pressed her hand to the water. Roots, impossibly, curled from beneath her palm, twisting into the water, cracking the stone at the pool's heart, blooming red through the blue. The river began to run again, but this time west toward Winterfell. The wildling woman knelt, weeping. The dawn is joined. The shadow will come again, but not today. But not for 1,000 days. Arya knelt beside Lyora and Gendry, her hands shaking, heart wild in her chest. For a moment, the pool reflected the sky above, blue and gold, cloudless. She looked into the water and saw not her face, but a field of barley, a wolf running, children laughing, a heart tree blooming in every hall. They climbed out of the chasm, the air lighter, the land above thawed, as if the first true spring had come at last. The wildling woman left them at the forest's edge, her voice trailing after, in a song of old Skagos, promising that the roots now ran everywhere, beneath the ice, beneath the sea, beneath every home where fire still burned. The journey home was swift, the wolves running at their heels, the river following in their wake, birds returning to every tree. At Winterfell, Sansa wept and laughed, and Jon knelt by Lyora, brushing her hair from her eyes. Bran only nodded, eyes distant, and said, "Now we must teach the world to tend its roots, not its shadows." They planted a tree in the godswood, half weirwood, half birch, a pale trunk streaked with red. Lyora laid her pipe in its branches. Arya and Gendry carved their names at its base, with a curl for the L in Lyora, and the barley children danced beneath its leaves. Winter came and went, but no shadow dared cross the water or stone. When Arya dreamed, she dreamed of the river running west, Lyora's song weaving through every valley, and the heart of Winterfell beating in time with the world. And as always, at dawn, Arya walked the yard and pressed her palm to the old heart tree. She listened and heard the roots, deep and sure, alive beneath her feet. She smiled, knowing that no matter what shadows rose beyond the horizon, Winterfell would endure, root to root, light to light, the dawn unbroken, the song unending. Ka-kay. Rain came down on Winterfell in drumming sheets that blurred the banners on the ramparts and turned the yard into a shallow lake. The storm broke in the night, thunder rolling out from the west, lightning raking blue-white claws across the battlements. At the height of it, Arya woke to the hush that followed, lying in darkness with Gendry's arm flung over her side, and Nymeria curled at the foot of the bed, eyes glowing faintly in the flash. She slipped free, bare feet silent on the rushes, and padded to the window. Below, rainwater ran off the rooftops in waterfalls. The godswood, nothing but a deeper shadow. But there was a sense of peace in the air, the crackle and snap of the world rinsing itself clean. She pressed her palm to the cool glass, remembering the river's end and the singing pool in the east, and the way Lyora's roots had wound through stone and water, turning darkness to gold. When dawn came, Winterfell shone. Water glittered in every gutter and gully. The sun broke through clouds like a benediction, and the mist rose off the fields and into the sky, lifting the green hills up to the heavens. By midday, the castle was alive with voices, maesters cursing the wet stores, children laughing as they built a dam across the muddy lane, and Sansa's measured tones as she met with the river traders in the audience chamber. Lyora was nowhere to be found, which was not uncommon. She was in the habit of disappearing at the first sign of rain, drawn to puddles and hidden places, and it was often hours before she would appear again, hair streaming and pipe in hand, to declare she'd taught the crows to dance or the frogs to sing. Arya found her at last beneath the heart tree, knee-deep in moss and fallen blossom, coaxing a tune from her pipe that made the last drops of rain quiver on the tips of the leaves. The child's face was solemn, eyes turned upward, lips barely parted, and the song she played was new, clear and bright, yet touched by the melancholy of things lost and found. Arya knelt beside her and waited for the music to end. "I dreamed of the river again," Lyora whispered, wiping her pipe on her sleeve. Only this time, the water was red. Arya tucked a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. "Red like blood?" "Red like sunrise," Lyora said. and there were roots growing from it, reaching everywhere, even to the sea. Nah. Arya nodded, remembering her own dreams. The sensation of roots beneath every stone, linking castle and forest, river and plain, the east and west and all the wild places in between. That's the new song, she murmured. That's what we built. That afternoon, Jon called a council in the great hall. All the high seats filled, Manderly and Glover and Dustin, the lords of the Tallheart Hills and the river, Tarly from the south, even 3 wildling chiefs with their braided beards and wolfskin mantles. The rain had made everyone late and irritable. But Arya sat quietly, Lyora at her feet, and listened as reports came in. The east was quiet, the Skagosi wildlings trading fish for barley and salt. The wall still stood, though half the towers were empty. The rivers were running high and red with silt, but there had been no new sign of the shadow, no word from the Golden Daggermen, no rumors of ice wights or dead men walking. Yet the world beyond the north was restless. Sansa read letters from King's Landing, Aegon's latest edict, the Faith's resurgence, whispers of ships amassing on the narrow sea. Samwell spoke of droughts in the Reach and wildfires near Old Town, while Tarly's men muttered of a sickness creeping through the south, the red cough that lingered in children's lungs and would not let go. The lords quarreled over the price of saltfish, the wildlings' hunting rights, the proper punishment for poachers caught north of the Barrowlands. Through it all, Arya felt a growing thread of anxiety, a sense that the storm had washed something clean but also swept something away, out into the world. After council, Arya walked the walls with Gendry, Lyora, and Nymeria trailing behind. The view from the east tower was wide, barley fields shining, the forest a mass of green shadow, a skein of white sheep on the western rise. Yet the horizon was darkening again, a line of gray thunderheads marching southward across the hills. "We're stronger than we were," Gendry said, reading her silence. "We're ready if anything comes." Arya nodded. "Are we ready for what doesn't come with a blade?" She glanced at Lyora, who walked ahead, head bowed, the pipe swinging from her hand. "There are storms we can't fight." Gendry touched her hand. "You've taught them to endure. That's more than swords." She wanted to believe it. That night, the rain returned. Arya sat in the solar with Sansa, helping draft letters, offers of grain to the Tarlis, an invitation for a joint moot at White Harbor, a request to the Archmasters for more records on the eastern lands. Bran arrived after midnight, his hair beaded with dew, a scrap of torn parchment in his hand. He gave it to Arya, his face a mask of worry. It was a raven's message from the wall, brief and strange. Ice on fire, ravens flying backward. Something walks in the woods at dusk. The heart is not enough. Arya folded it, lips pressed thin. "What does it mean?" Bran shrugged. "I see fire beneath the ice. I see roots burning. I see a path that circles back on itself." "Is it Lyora?" Sansa asked, voice tight. Bran looked at Arya, not Sansa. "It's all of us. The rivers changed course, but so has the night." And I've said, they did not sleep well. At dawn, Arya took Gendry and Lyora, and rode north, following the King's Road through misty moors and fields rimed with morning frost. They found signs of fire at the first abandoned croft, blackened grass, a ring of stones fused by heat, the bones of a wild dog charred to white. No footprints, no scent for Nymeria to follow, only the memory of burning. They pressed on, day after day. Every village they passed had stories. A fox with blue flames for eyes, a well that steamed at midnight, children who spoke in riddles. Lyora listened gravely, sometimes taking up her pipe and playing a tune that calmed the frightened and made even the oldest man smile, if only for a moment. At the wall, all was still. Ghosts stalked the snowfields, gaunt but proud. Jon's old cloak hung in the great hall, brittle with salt and cold. The watch commander greeted Arya as Lady Stark, but his eyes kept drifting north, toward the unmapped wilds. Ravens cawed overhead, restless. That night, Bran dreamed. He saw the river running with red, a child at its heart, singing the sun up over the ruins of a burned forest. He saw shadows gathering in the east, roots smoldering. He saw a heart tree ringed by wolves, the leaves turning black. Arya listened to his words, heart heavy. "It's always the roots," she murmured. "We can't let them burn," Lyora whispered, pressing her pipe to Arya's hand. Arya gathered her people. Gendry, Lyora, Nymeria, a handful of the watched best, and Ghost. They crossed the wall at dawn, ice groaning beneath their boots. The wild country stretching endless ahead. For 3 days they walked in silence, the sun never rising higher than a smear of pale gold. They found a forest burned to ash. A single heart tree standing in a field of cinders, its face scorched but unbowed. At its roots, a pool bubbled, the water red as blood. Lyora knelt and played. The music rose, thin and wavering, then grew strong, ringing across the plain. Arya watched as roots broke through the ash, curling out into the world. Ghost howled. Nymeria circled the tree. Hackles raised, but the ground beneath their feet grew warm. The ice cracking as something alive forced its way upward. From the smoke, shadows emerged. 3 of them. Tall and thin, eyes like coals, hands of ice and bone. Arya stepped forward, needle in hand, Gendry at her side. Lyora's music grew louder, the pipe almost glowing in the dusk. One shadow pointed at Arya, voice cracking the air. "You broke the night. The river runs backward. Why do you call the dawn?" Arya answered with steel. "Because the world needs it." The shadow lashed out, ice and fire crashing together. The world rang like a bell. Gendry smashed Hearthbreaker into the ground, the force sending cracks racing out from his boots. Arya slashed at the darkness, needle burning with red light. Lyora's song soared, joined by Nymeria's howl and Ghost's wild call. Roots burst from the earth, coiling around the shadows, dragging them into the bubbling pool. The water steamed, turning gold, then clear. The heart tree's leaves fluttered, shedding ash. For a moment, dawn broke over the plain, brighter than any sun Arya had ever seen. Then it was over. The pool stilled. The heart tree's face wept sap, dark but sweet. The shadows were gone. The world silent. They camped at the tree that night, all 5. Arya, Gendry, Lyora, Nymeria, and Ghost. Curled together at the base, the ground warm, the stars sharp above. In the morning, Lyora carved a new rune into the trunk. A curl for hope, a circle for song. Arya pressed her palm to it, feeling the thrum of roots stretching everywhere. Under river and stone, sea and plain, home and wild. They returned to Winterfell in spring's first bloom, the fields rich, the trees in leaf, the castle walls strong with new mortar and old love. Sansa greeted them at the gate, Bran waiting in his chair, the lords assembled on the steps. Lyora danced up the lane, pipe singing, and Arya saw how every face brightened. Every shadow lessened, how the north endured. The song of the root spread, south to the reach, east to the sea, west to the barrows, north to the wall. Arya ruled not as a blade but as a bridge, binding wound to wound, hope to hope, each child a promise, each dawn a new chance. Gendry's forges sang, Bran's maps grew, Sansa's voice carried across every hall. Lyora's music lifted into the air, blending with the calls of wolves and the laughter of children, and Winterfell flourished. A root deep as the world, a song strong enough to outlast any night. And so, long after shadows faded and rain washed the stones, the Lady of Winterfell kept her promise, to return, to endure, to hold the root. And the dawn she kindled spread on and on, forever, into the wide green world. Ah! Ha! Late spring melted into summer, and the land beyond Winterfell began to shimmer with new life. Grass growing long and thick where blood and fire once scorched the earth. Each morning, Arya rose before the sun, listening for the bird song that always came first from the barley, and then rippled across the yards. Lark, blackbird, finch, magpie. The whole flock returned to fields that months before had been nothing but frost and thunder. In the gentle hours before the castle awoke, Arya walked the godswood with Nymeria at her side, and sometimes Lyora slipping through the undergrowth. Her pipe soft beneath the trees, shaping the air into song. She'd learned from the heart tree's quiet, the old power that throbbed beneath root and leaf. how to set aside her old restlessness for this patient strength. Jon had gone south again, summoned by new banners and old debts. Sansa ruled with the patience of a stone worn smooth by water. Bran spent days in the rookery, and nights in silent meditation by the pools, fingers stained with ink and eyes ever distant. Gendry's forge rang with the voices of 3 generations of smiths. Ironbelly from White Harbor, the black-haired twins from the Barrowlands, a former then who hammered out spearheads like snowflakes, each blade etched with a sigil and a swirl for Lyora. Arya drifted among them, no longer searching for where she fit, but making space wherever she went, instructing the young with spear and bow, planning the harvest with the elders, speaking judgment to the hall in the morning, and running with the wolves under the moon at night. Trouble did not vanish with spring. At first the shadows came as rumors, crops blackening in the western barrows, a fevered trader babbling of a night inside the sun in Bravos. Letters from Sam reporting the river water south of the neck was rising and falling without reason. Arya listened, weighed, and sent riders. She heard every story. She believed only half of them, but she kept her own counsel, reading the shape of the world in the eyes of those who stood before her. It was Lyora who felt it first, a tremor in the music. She'd taken to teaching the youngest children to read the runes at the heart tree, guiding their fingers along the old carvings, making up songs for each symbol. One evening, as the sky bruised toward dusk, she stopped in the midst of a tale and shivered, pipe slipping from her hand to land in the moss. "The roots are crying," she whispered. Arya sent for Bran, who came slowly, a crow on each shoulder. The boy-turned seer pressed his hand to the weirwood, closed his eyes, and after a long hush said only, "Something is wrong beneath the Dreadfort. The water does not flow. The root is damned." Bendermaf. They gathered in Sansa's solar, candles guttering in the late wind. Gendry and Arya, Lyora cradling her pipe, Maester Calrin with his ink-stained fingers, Bran at the window, Sansa reading the mood like a ledger. Jon's raven, when it came, brought only silence. His host delayed, the veil uncertain, war brewing again beyond the Trident. "We must handle this alone," Sansa said. So at dawn, Arya rode east, Gendry beside her, Lyora wrapped in the blue umber cloak, Nymeria and 2 of her half-grown pups loping at their heels. They passed through villages where the wheat stood too tall, unmoving in the wind. Farmers spoke of water that tasted faintly of ash, sheep birthing lambs too early, an owl that circled the well at noon. They reached the Dreadfort by nightfall, a fortress rebuilt but always shadowed, towers black against the pale moon. The banners new, but the stones old and uneasy. The new lord, a cousin from House Riswell, loyal enough, though with a haunted look, met them at the gate, bowing so low Arya nearly asked him to stand straight and speak like a man. He led them to the old dungeons, where the walls sweated brine and the air tasted sour. "It started with the rain," he whispered, lantern trembling in his hand. "The cellars flooded, then the well stopped. We sent for the maester at White Harbor, but he never came." Arya sent Gendry and the lord to inspect the wells, while she and Lyora slipped into the lower passages, Nymeria's muzzle low, ears twitching at every echo. The further they went, the warmer it grew, until the stones themselves seemed to pulse with heat. At the lowest vault, they found the spring, once a trickle, now a stagnant pool, the surface broken by slow, thick bubbles that stank of rot. Lyora knelt, pressing her hand to the water, her face twisting in pain. "It's poisoned," she gasped. "Something has bitten the root." Arya knelt beside her, studying the water. Tiny bones floated just below the surface. Mouse, bird, something larger, all stripped clean. Nymeria whined and backed away. Above them, Gendry shouted. Arya drew needle and ran, Lyora at her heels. They found Gendry and the lord. At the far well, the stones black with slime, a shape shifting in the dark. It was a shadow, taller than any man, eyes hollow and burning, mouth stretched wide in a silent scream. Arya put herself between Lyora and the shadow. It moved like smoke and ice, every motion wrong. Gendry swung Hearthbreaker, striking through its middle. Nothing. Arya slashed at it, steel passing through air that seemed thicker than fog. Lyora began to play, a low, trembling note that set the walls to humming. The shadow writhed. Roots burst from the walls, dry and black, wriggling like worms, trying to choke the light. Arya slashed at them, Gendry smashing with his hammer. The Lord of the Dreadfort screamed as a tendril wound around his ankle, pulling him toward the well. Lyora's song grew louder, a wild, desperate melody. Arya seized the child's hand, pressing her palm to the stone, to the ancient root beneath. "Sing for the living," she said, voice hard as winter. "Sing the rot away." Lyora's pipe rose and fell, shrill and furious. The roots twitched, then burned with red light, the blackness flaking away, the shadow shrieking. Arya plunged needle into the heart of the largest root, and it burst like a blister, hot water surging out, washing the darkness down the well. The shadow vanished. The roots stilled, pale and wet, breathing slow. The Lord of the Dreadfort sobbed, mud and slime slicking his face. Outside, the sky had turned gold. Steam drifted from the well, and when Lyora played a gentler song, flowers bloomed from the cracks between stones. Tiny, fragile things, but alive. They spent the night at the Dreadfort, the people bringing food and drink, their eyes wide, voices hushed. Arya told them to clean the wells, burn the rot, tend the roots. Lyora slept curled against Nymeria, Gendry keeping watch by the window, Hearthbreaker across his knees. At dawn they rode home, the sky bright and blue, the air sweet. Villages they passed seemed brighter, the wheat stirring in a true wind, the sheep bounding over green hills. In the yard at Winterfell, Sansa embraced them, Bran nodding approval. The old power at rest once more. As summer ripened, the north prospered. Fields thickened with grain, rivers ran clear. Children's laughter echoed from the yards. But Arya did not let down her guard. She trained every child in the old and new ways, sparring, reading the runes, listening to the world's pulse. Lyora grew taller, her music sharper, laughter easier. Gendry's forge sang with every dawn. Letters from the south came more often. War in the Riverlands, new kings. A faceless assassin caught in Bravos. The faith growing bold. Sansa sent wise replies, forging peace where she could. Jon returned once, worn but smiling, telling tales of wildlings and new alliances. Through it all, Arya kept her morning vigil at the heart tree. She felt the world's wounds, but also its strength. Roots deep, song sweet, fire and water in balance. Sometimes Lyora joined her, pressing her palm to Arya's, pipe silent but eyes bright. One night, as the moon rose huge and golden, Arya and Gendry walked the wall, the north quiet below them. Stars scattered like sparks. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. Arya smiled, watching Nymeria stalk a shadow along the parapet. Lyora's laughter ringing from the yard. "Never. I have all the adventures I ever needed right here." And so the years passed. Shadows came, and were driven away. Roots tangled, but always found the sun. The Lady of Winterfell was remembered not as a killer, but as the guardian of hope, the friend of wolves, the mother of spring. Her name grew with the roots, running from river to river, hall to hall, song to song, a promise that no winter, no shadow could ever outlast the dawn. And beneath the heart tree, the roots thrummed on, deeper and stronger, forever. A.K. Summer ripened over the north in waves of gold, days lengthening into honeyed evenings and the nights thick with the scent of grass and distant storms. Barley and oats reached to the knees, the apple trees behind the sept bowed with fruit, and every roof in Winterfell shone new-mended, sunlight-gilding stone, as if the whole castle were crowned by the sun. Each morning Arya walked the ramparts at dawn with Nymeria, her shadow black and sure on the ancient stones, and watched the world shake off the last of its long winter. Sometimes Lyora trailed behind, humming new tunes on her pipe, the notes light as dew. Sometimes Gendry met her by the old granary, their hands brushing, a silent promise of all the years still to come. The north had never been as peaceful in living memory. Lords rode in with grain and news, not swords. Merchants from White Harbor and Old Town lined up before the gates, hoping for a place at the fair. The summer feast drew crowds from 100 leagues. Hill clans with blue-painted faces, the Manderleys in silk, Lady Barbary Dustin in her sable, wildlings in fox pelts, Dornish traders in gold and orange. Sansa presided at the high table, regal and serene. Bran in his wheeled chair, quiet and all-seeing, with a wise smile for every child who approached. Gendry at the center of a laughing cluster of smiths. Arya half among the crowd, half outside it, a watchful presence at the edges of the light. Yet peace, Arya knew, was only the surface. Beneath, the world's roots tangled and pulled. The aftermath of the poisoned well at Dreadfort echoed through every word of every letter from the Barrowlands and White Knife. The old gods were restless, the new gods watchful, and the world itself seemed to pulse with unseen tides. Some nights, lightning flickered in the north, no thunder following, and the ravens brought warnings from the wall. Strange lights beyond the woods, the echo of drums under the earth, old ghost songs heard on the wind. Bran listened, and sometimes he nodded to himself, as if the future whispered just beyond hearing. Lyora heard it in dreams. She grew tall that summer, strong and wild as any wolf. Arya watched her run with Nymeria's pack at dusk, or slip among the wildflowers with children in tow, and saw how the land leaned toward, grass straightening at her touch, bees circling her head, the godswood trembling at her laughter. At her lessons, she asked questions no maester could answer. Why rivers curved, why crows sometimes called at night, why the heart tree bled more sap in the moon's dark. Because the world is always changing, Arya said, sitting cross-legged at the pool's edge, Lyora's pipe in her lap. That's what makes it worth guarding. And what makes it dangerous. One night, in the thick of summer, as the feast wound down and the first rain in weeks pattered soft on the roof, Arya was called to the Solard by Maester Colin. A raven had arrived from the neck, the seal unbroken but the parchment ragged, the ink running in strange rivulets. She read it once, then again, Sansa at her shoulder. Lady of Winterfell. The root stirs at Greywater. The bog water's bitter, the moon comes twice in the same night. Reed blood turns in its sleep. We keep watch but feel the river's memory rising. Bring song if you can. Howland Reed. Lyora heard the words as Arya spoke them. Her face grew solemn, eyes dark as river stones. We must go, she said. The roots there are cousins to ours, if one sickens. Gendry was ready before dawn, weapons packed and hammer strapped across his back. Bran pressed Arya's hand before they left. Listen to the land, he murmured, voice deeper than his years. The river's song will guide you home. They rode south with Lyora, Gendry, and a small escort. The journey was slow. Half the roads vanished into water by the time they neared Greywater. The marshland endless and treacherous, mists rising in columns. Crannogmen met them at the border, green-cloaked and wary. Arya had not seen Howland Reed since girlhood, but his eyes were unchanged. Quick, sharp, missing nothing. He led them through the bog on rafts of woven willow and birch, Lyora at the prow, Nymeria ranging the shadows. Howland spoke as they drifted. The water turns. Eels are dying. Frogs with two heads crawl the reed beds, birds nest, and then vanish. There is a rot beneath the mud, and it sings to those who listen. Melyeh. That night, in Greywater Watch, always moving, always half a dream, Arya and Lyora sat beside the bog pool. The water bubbled, restless, the air alive with frog and bird and unseen things. Lyora played her pipe, a deep, mournful song. The earth itself seemed to answer, the reeds trembling, mud bubbling, even the fish circling slow as if listening. Howland knelt, dipping his hand into the black water. There is something trapped here, an old wound, a root that never healed. We must go beneath. Down. He led them into a half-flooded passage beneath the watch. Stone older than memory, the walls lined with carved faces, eyes hollow, mouths open. At the end, a chamber held the roots of the island, tangled and thick. wound around a black stone pulsing with faint red light. The air was foul, the water at their ankles warm and oily. Lyora pressed her palm to the stone. It throbbed, pulsing in time with her breath. Gendry watched. Hammer at the ready. Arya gripped needle, senses sharp. Dot. Shadow. Lyora whispered. There's a shadow here. From the stone, a darkness uncoiled. Slow, cold, the memory of drowned men, of secrets hidden in the deep. Arya saw faces. Her father, her mother, even old Nan, flickering in the black. The shadow swelled, reaching for Lyora. Arya cut at it, blade passing through chill air. Gendry struck with the hammer, splashing water. Howland Reed chanted words in the old tongue. Lyora began to play, and the music rippled the darkness, the shadow writhing in pain. Bring the root, Arya called, voice ringing in the stone chamber. Lyora pressed both hands to the tangled roots. Her pipe rose in a wild, ancient song, one Arya recognized. Half lullaby, half battle cry. The song her mother once sang when thunder rattled the windows. The black stone cracked, red light spilling out, roots burning and then blooming, white. The shadow screamed, shrank, and was gone. Water surged, then cleared. The chamber filled with a scent of new earth, the roots swelling, healing, twining together in a living knot. When they emerged, the dawn was bright. Birds sang, frogs leaped, the air sweet with life. Howland Reed embraced Arya and Lyora both, his eyes shining. The land remembers. Thank you. When? They returned to Winterfell slowly, every step brighter. The marshes green, the rivers clear, the land itself lighter. News spread. The rot was gone. Eels returned to the nets. Birds filled the sky. At home, Arya found the godswood greener, the heart tree's leaves fuller, sap running like tears of joy. She pressed her palm to the bark and heard it, roots humming with song, the pulse of life spreading far beyond Winterfell. The peace that followed was not the brittle stillness before a storm, but the deep, rich silence of growing things, of wounds healed, of new beginnings. Years passed. Children born in the shadow of winter grew to run with wolves and laugh with Lyora's songs. Sansa's hair silvered, Bran's gaze deepened. Gendry built new forges and taught his trade to a dozen eager hands. Lyora became legend, a girl grown to woman called Root Singer, guardian of rivers, friend to every green thing. And Arya, Lady of Winterfell, ruled through all seasons, firm, fair, patient. She grew lines at the corners of her eyes and learned the patience of roots and rivers. No killer's shadow haunted her. Her legacy was laughter, wisdom, protection, the song of the North enduring. On quiet evenings she walked to Godswood and felt her father's presence in the breeze, her mother's voice in the rustle of leaves, the old wolf's heart beating in every child's joy. When Arya was old, and the new heart tree she and Lyora had planted together was tall and strong, she sat beneath its boughs with the children at her feet. Lyora, now grown, sat at her side, pipe in hand, and played a song of root and river, of hope and healing. The sun set through the leaves, red and gold and green, and Arya listened, her heart full, as the roots hummed on beneath her, deep and strong, the promise of spring and summer, and the long, bright dawn that would outlast even her memory. And so the story of Arya Stark, no longer a killer, but the Lady of Winterfell, guardian of hope, mother of a North reborn, endured. As long as the roots ran deep and the song was sung, darkness could never truly return. Oanji. As the years slipped onward and the world deepened in green, Arya Stark's legend came to rest among the roots of Winterfell. Her name spoken as lightly as the wind that moved through barley, as quietly as the spring that shimmered beneath the heart tree. The North learned to breathe again in her care, and the realm she governed, neither by iron rule nor by fire and blood, but by vigilance, grace, and that tireless Stark resolve, flourished beneath banners that had once been tattered and soiled, now snapping proud and clean in the warmest summer winds in a generation. Arya's daily steps mapped the living heart of her home. She paced the ramparts at sunrise, boots brushing moss from the stone, pausing to watch the children racing in the court with Nemiria's progeny leaping at their heels. She lingered over the ledger of grain and salted fish, sent a nod of approval to the kitchen staff, and strolled through the market with Lyora at her side, now a young woman, swift of step and voice, her hair a dark river down her back, her laughter drawing every eye. The small folk deferred to Arya with a smile, quick to share gossip, troubles, or praise for a fine harvest. She listened, and where she could, she fixed. Where she could not, she remembered, and took the burden back to council. In the council chamber, Arya's word was law, though she wielded it gently. Sansa's wisdom, Bronn's rare but weighty guidance, Gendry's pragmatic fire, these became her compass. Gendry was never far from the forges, his face lined and bronzed, teaching 3 apprentices at once, pausing only to join Arya for quiet suppers beneath the stars. Lyora joined Arya at council now, observing as lords and stewards laid out their disputes and dreams. Her voice, steady, measured, never sharp, became a second current through the chamber, and all who heard it spoke of the peace that seemed to follow. But time did not banish shadows. Each new summer brought a new uncertainty. The sea growing restless to the east, strange shapes glimpsed among the standing stones of Skagos, faint tremors beneath the earth near the old wall. Traders out of Bravos brought tales of sunless storms at sea, and a cold wind that can sing, and even in the north, a sickness once unknown would sometimes strike, a fever that burned without source, cured only by Lyora's gentle songs and Arya's wolfish will to see her people survive. A decade passed, then another. The children Arya had taught to read the runes and notch an arrow now wore the gray cloaks of the guard, and some, those with the touch, became river singers in distant towns, their names drifting back to Winterfell like a proud echo. The heart tree and the birch Lyora, planted beside it, towered high, white and red branches intertwined, their shade cooling even the hottest midsummer noon. Beneath them, a bench of pale ash wood was carved with every name of Arya's household and pack, a living memory to all she had gathered and guarded. In her 4th decade as Lady of Winterfell, Arya felt her knees begin to stiffen. Her mornings stretched longer before pain faded, her sleep lightened. She walked slower but saw more. The way the new master of horse spoke gently to a limping colt, the silent exchanges between kitchen girls and squires on the eve of a feast, the young lord from the manor who looked to Lyora as if she were sunlight after storm. Gendry, hair now gone to white, still worked the forges, though more often than not he directed from a chair, his voice rough but loving. Arya would sometimes join him, hand in hand, listening to the song of hammers and fire, the closest thing to a heartbeat she ever found outside her own chest. One autumn dusk, with the barley harvested and the air full of wood smoke, Arya called her household to the godswood for a feast. Tables circled the heart tree and its companion, candles and lanterns strung between the branches, banners hung above. Stark gray, Baratheon gold, the river blue of reed, and new banners for Lyora's root singers, a pipe crossed over a green swirl. As the moon climbed, Lyora played a song for Arya alone, a melody both old and new, woven from the first tune she'd played at the river's end, the wild notes of a wolf's run, and the gentle lullaby of the north itself. Children danced, elders wept, and Arya sat, Gendry's hand on her shoulder, smiling into the candlelit dark. Later, Arya walked the paths of Winterfell one last time, the halls echoing with memory. She saw her father's shadow in the solar, her mother's laughter in the kitchens, Bran's childhood hush in the library, Sansa's patient kindness in every small act. In the yard, the wolves moved as gray shadows, silent but present, and Nymeria's line ran strong. That night, beneath the heart tree, Arya slept in Gendry's arms, Lyora singing softly. She dreamed of running, over fields and rivers, through woods and storm, to a place where all stories began and ended, a place where she was both child and lady, lone wolf and pack. In the morning, Winterfell woke to soft bells and bright sky. Arya Stark, Lady of Winterfell, had passed in her sleep, her face peaceful as snow. She was buried beneath the roots of the heart tree. At her request, Gendry's ashes mingled with hers, Lyora's song sending her on. 1,000 small folk, lords, and children stood in silence. Lyora wept, but her tears were soft. The land was rich, the roots were deep. The birch beside the heart tree blossomed that spring, white flowers thick as snow. Lyora took Arya's seat, her first act to walk the walls with Nymeria's great-granddaughter at her side, watching the north awake. She ruled not by fear, but by memory, strength, and song. The north endured. The heart tree and the birch grew together, their roots tangled beneath stone and soil, binding Winterfell to every field and river, to the wild beyond the wall and the warmth of every fire. Arya's name lingered not as a legend of blood, but as a hope. A lesson passed from mother to child, lord to small folk, that the world is best tended by those who watch, who run, who listen, who forgive, who remember. In the quiet that followed, when storms battered the coast and southern kings warred over empty chairs, the north stood. Wolves ran the woods, the song of roots echoed in every hearth. And at dawn, in the hush before the world awoke, the Lady of Winterfell's spirit walked the ramparts, a quiet smile in the summer wind, forever home.